Okay, it's 5 o'clock. I'll call the regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. First up is roll call.
John Kreischer. Pat McKee.
Here.
Joanna Reyes. Here. Corey Sillers.
Here.
Karen Vandenberg.
Here.
Lee Webster.
Here.
Lance Trollope.
Here.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Jim Boucher.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is the mission of the Wausau School District to advance student learning, achievement, and success. We'll now recognize any speakers that have signed up. There are none. So we will move on then to approval of the consent agenda, which may include appointments, additional staff, replacement staff, contract increases, separations, including resignations, contract decreases, and terminations, leaves of absence, retirements, minutes of the special session of October 24th, 2022, special session of November 1st, 2022, regular session of November 14th, 2022, special session of November 22nd, 2022, and the special session of December 5th, 2022, payment of bills, budget status, and investment report, as well as donations to the district, and to recognize those individuals, Mark Lee Lambert, Marathon Chapter of Whitetails Unlimited, Renee Kressel, Incredible Bank, Knights of Columbus, McClax Incorporated, Neighbors Place, Wausau East Gridiron Club, Wausau East Junior Jacks Youth Wrestling, Wisconsin Valley Flag Football Incorporated, John Warotny, Don and Carrie Zaromsky, and Roxanne Zaromsky. I'm seeking a motion to approve the consent agenda with great gratitude to the donations.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we will have our audit report. Chuck Krieger from Hawkins Ash CPAs will present to the board the results of the Wausau School District June 30th, 2022 audited financial statements.
You already introduced Chuck, so no
right.
further introduction needed. Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, and Bob told me he had a long agenda tonight, and although the first section didn't take 15 minutes, that means I have extra time, I guess.
That's right.
No,
That's why we did it that way.
Not doing that. So I'll go through this relatively quickly, but a few key points I wanted to mention tonight. Right off the top, if you all got, okay, if we're looking at this page 3 through 5, and I'm going by the page numbers, not the PDF, but right there, there's the independent auditor's report. Those of you who have been on this board or in public service that have seen audit reports from different audit firms, it's been changed in the last year. It now gives what I call the money paragraph right at the top. Okay, in the past, you had some of this verbiage, and then you kind of flipped a page, and it gave our opinion. Now we start off with the opinion. It gives some basis for the opinion, and then responsibilities of management and the auditors. So as to the opinion, you got a clean opinion. You've gotten a clean opinion every year that I've worked on this audit. I would expect nothing less. It means it's done, you audit and your numbers are materially correct based on auditing standards, okay? And I know I mentioned this in the past, but materially correct doesn't mean exact in every penny, but it's materially correct, and it means other people can rely on the data that's in there, okay? So the basis of opinion mentions what kind of standards we have to follow. Responsibilities of management. You may or may not know that you have responsibilities for these audited statements. Technically, You prepare the statements and we give our opinion on it. So we gave you a clean opinion. So if you go to page 4, it's got auditor's responsibilities. And this section, again, has changed a little bit. Just want to point some stuff out. The second section there where there's 5 bullet points, it talks about exercise of professional judgment, maintain professional skepticism, obtain an understanding of internal controls and that type of thing. We have done that in the past for your audit. Okay, we've always done that. But now they're having us put it out front in the report that, yes, that's part of our job, that we do those things. Again, some people are like, well, why didn't you do that in the past? Well, that's just the evolution of the beast. But now it's clearly stated, we have been doing that for years, and now it's in the body of the report, so you can see that, and anyone else who reads the report is well aware of that. Okay? After that, reporting required supplementary information and supplementary information, and then other reporting required. These are all reports that are required and information that's required because you get a audit in accordance with government auditing standards. A lot of your funding comes from through government channels, state and federal government, okay? It also means that you get what's called a single audit, which is I guess an extra look maybe at the state and federal dollars that you get. Now, we don't take that extra look at every program, but there's criteria we go by, and we kind of generally rotate those programs that we check on every year. So, all that being said, just want to point out that the report, if you're looking last year to this year, is not going to look the same. But the gist of it is that you got a clean opinion. Okay. The next section there that goes on for about 11 or 12 pages is management discussion and analysis. And I have to give kudos to Noel and his staff. They are the ones that put this part of the report together. Now, it's labeled management discussion analysis, which you would say, well, management should be putting it together. Most of my clients have smaller staff. They have us put the information together and they approve it, okay? But your staff takes care of it, puts it in readable format, I guess I would say. Sometimes accountants get a little caught up in verbiage and I hate to say this word, legalese, but this is kind of common sense information, what happened to you, some of the highlights. You had your net assets increase, and I would go down to where it says district's total governmental fund balance increase, that section right there. And then when I say it's kind of readable in plain English, he talks about certain items that change from last year versus expected and indicates positive or negative right next to it. So that's straightforward. You don't, have to know, okay, if it's a decreased expense, that's positive. If it's an increased revenue, that's positive. But if it goes the other direction, so just as it's laid out well, okay. So your general fund had an increase in fund balance, and right now your fund balance represents about 27.5% of your one-year expenditures. That's a good number. Districts we do out of the Manitowoc office, we do about 17 or 18 of them, kind of across the state. Generally goes between 15% and around 37%. Okay, so 27.5. That is a good number. It's solid. You don't have to go out and short-term borrow to pay your payroll over the summer and that type of thing. So long-term liabilities decreased in the last year. Obviously, that's going to change with the approval of your referendum. But for the prior year, they did decrease, which means you paid off more debt than you had incurred. After that, a fair amount of standard kind of verbiage. So if we're going to go to page 10. And this is some of the numbers that show up in the detailed reports that are farther along in the financial statements. When you look at this, you have current assets, capital assets. I mean, you have a lot of dollars that you're responsible for. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. The one that's kind of weird, the deferred outflows of resource and deferred inflows, that has to do with stuff like your Wisconsin retirement system and your post-employment benefits that you provide for retirees. In the past, I've mentioned about the Wisconsin retirement system. It's well-funded. It's a good system. And I've not consciously disparaged Illinois a little bit, I think. But before I came today, I said, well, I wonder if that still holds true, because I've kind of said that over the years. So I did some checking online, and Wisconsin has, as of 2020, the highest funding ratio of any public employee system in the country. And at that time, they were 105% funded, which means if they had to pay out $100 for retirement benefits, they have $105 set aside for that. Okay? Illinois is at 37%, so 37 cents on the dollar. So if they had to pay out, they would have to borrow 63 cents for every dollar they paid out to be able to do that. I wasn't just, making stuff up. It still holds true, and it's a well-run system. So financial position, capital assets, you're over 100 million in capital assets, and that's after depreciation. Around 50 million of long-term liabilities, and your net position is $125 million positive. Now, you might say, well, unrestricted has a negative number. The rules say, okay, like in your case, you've got about 15 million of Wisconsin retirement system asset reflected up in the assets section. You have to reserve some of your equity to cover that. So 15 million of that would come right off the top of that. So it's, you're unrestricted. It's a little misleading by showing the negative 17 million. And again, this is not the information at DPI that you do for reporting. That information that they're interested in comes a little later on. Page 11 shows your operations, where you get your revenues from, where you get your where your expenses go. Again, you've got about you spend about 55% of your expenditures on direct instruction. From when I took office, our range goes from about 54% to around 64%. Okay, so you're in the range for direct instruction. Major sources of revenue for you obviously are property taxes and state aid. You can see that at the top. And then the page 12 at the bottom, the net cost. So you do have some programs that are funded directly with either user fees or state aid combination. Your special ed, for instance, they get a fair amount of IDEA, which is federal money, and state handicapped aid. Okay. The other one I was going to mention is your food service program. In the last few years, due to the pandemic and COVID, the federal government paid every meal that you served to a student at 100% of the as a free lunch. Okay, and many of my districts were able to add to their fund equity in food service fund because of that, which will allow them probably to do some improvements and maybe upgrades of kitchens and that kind of stuff that they maybe couldn't have done in the past. Some pie charts on 13 that kind of visually gives you a little bit better idea about that, 54% from state aid. So if we flip to, I'm just going to kind of go with the charts. Page 15 has some information on capital assets, which I mentioned earlier. And obviously the biggest number you have is invested in your buildings, and that will continue to be the case. If we look at the obligations, page 16, and this is another thing that you put in your management discussion analysis that not a lot of my districts do. It's the future debt mill rate. So it kind of gives you a prospective look at, if we're borrowing money, or what's the mill rate really going to do from year to year. It's going to take a little jump in '23, but then comes back down to some manageable numbers. Now, obviously, when you add the new debt on there, that may change, but it's still going to be similar to what it had been. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was part of the idea with this. Some of the debt falls off and it gets replaced with for the new debt and the new improvements to the schools. So, page 17, factors bearing on the district's future. Generally, this area talks about difficulties that many of my districts have in stuff like open enrollment, students in and out, being a low-cost district. For whatever reason, I have a number of districts that on a per pupil cost basis, they're in the lower half of the districts in the state, okay? And the other thing that comes into play is competing for teachers. It used to be you didn't have that where teachers did a lot of moving around and it was pretty much the contract is the contract the union had. And now there's more of I think there's more chance for teachers to go someplace else, and bidding occurs. Nothing outrageous, but that's something every district has to kind of put in play with. Okay, how are they going to keep and attract good teachers? Okay, after that, just more detail on information I've already discussed. I do want to kind of stay to my 15 minutes of fame here, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail other than a couple of other items to mention. You guys are self-insured for health and dental, and the last 2 years have been fairly steady in that respect. Again, you have 27% of your one-year expenditures in your reserves. That's more than adequate, but being self-insured, you never know when you're going to take a hit on that because it's not like you can go and raise the premiums during the year. That's pretty much set at the beginning of the year, the premium equivalency that goes out and what the staff pays and what the district pays. But you have no control over how sick people are going to get or what happens, a car accident, heart attack, heart transplant, who knows. But you have stuff like stop loss in place to guard against some of those really catastrophic items. But again, it's something that you do need to have sufficient reserves to weather the storm if that comes up. And in your case, you do have that. And other than obviously the subsequent event, later on we talk about new geo debt. Your referendum was successful and you stood in on that multi-year plan. I did look at that online after it was passed, and I looked and like, wow, they really got this laid out from a timing perspective, when they're going to have this done, school starts, when they're going to have that done. So it looks like a great setup. Now, obviously, weather plays a factor and all that kind of stuff, but I'm sure you're excited to get that started.
Very.
Questions?
Any questions from board members? You've heard me say it before, one of these years, hopefully it never happens, but if it ever comes and it's not a clean report, then you'll have all kinds of questions. But when you come forward with
And
good information,
I
then
would expect them, yes.
Then, yeah.
One thing, DPI, I don't know if I want to say requires, but if they see anything that indicates, things are kind of sliding sideways from whatever they get, they certainly call that out to both the auditors and the management of the district. And they have a kind of work in process program where your data gets uploaded frequently from your accounting system. So they're really able to kind of keep an eye on that and I haven't met too many districts that are a real fan of that yet, but I'm sure they will come around. They'll see some benefit down the road. And as always, if there are other questions that come to mind afterwards, feel free to send them to Bob or Noel, and they will forward them, and we'll get your questions answered.
Okay. All right, then, I am seeking a motion to approve the 2021-2022 audit report as presented.
So moved.
We have a first and a second. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we will move on to old and recurring business. This comes from the Education Operations Committee of the Whole meeting. At the November meeting, Bob Tess, Chief Finance and Business Services Officer, shared many of the key variables contributing to the district's multi-year financial projection model. The model represents a baseline using current information to which adjustments are subsequently made. The projection model uses budget numbers from the 2022-2023 district budget with percentages and/or dollar amounts cast forward, along with adjustments to create this baseline. Once these assumptions are built into the projection model, it will be presented to the board at a later date. Anything new to add since the last meeting? Any other questions? We'll be continuing to work on this year-round. So, okay, and that is just an informational item, no action needed. And same for the next one. At the November Education Operations Committee meeting, Mr. Tomsky and Dr. Rauscher updated the board on the continued exploration of weighted grades and/or a Law Day system. Again, not an action item. Any additional information to add? Okay. And the next one is an older recurring business item, but it's one that will probably keep coming back. We're going to keep working on it, and we do have some additional information tonight. At the November Education Operations Committee meeting, administration reviewed an example of a district restructuring plan, along with some relevant data regarding this plan. In this presentation, administration will begin to review measurable outcomes and share an analysis of high school restructuring options.
Good evening, everybody. So, Cassie, could you pull up that restructuring, not that one yet, the presentation first? Thank you. So I don't normally call attention to the title page, but I put it in blue because we're actually changing our the types of discussion we're having. We've been talking about awareness and kind of generally what might restructuring look like and accomplish, and so now we're going to really dig into more analysis of possible outcomes. So the next slide is our why. We always start with the why, and again, this is about improving service by becoming more efficient. I think you've seen that enough. Don't need to go through that. As well as some of the overarching concerns. We've seen these several times. Again, if people have questions, those are some of the main things that we want to really impact. Go to the next one. This one I added as a reaction to our last subcommittee meeting where many of the members of the subcommittee were hearing that people just didn't think we were really going to do something about these issues. And so I wanted to come out with a fairly strong statement. We know that there are significant differences in the experience for students and families and staff. We know we have financial issues that we have to address as well. So I just feel we are compelled to make some changes. And so I say that so that people don't sit passively by, wait for a decision, and then come and talk to us. We really want your feedback. Matter of fact, a little bit later tonight, we're going to do a brief analysis of an idea that came out of our Wausau West or Wausau East listening session. So we do need to do something, and so please engage with us. Next slide. So tonight, we will preview the next community video like we've been doing at every other meeting. We'll talk about the decisions that the board would need to make, talk about some risk analysis, some of the measurable benefits, and then tonight we're going to talk specifically about high school scenarios. We'll review the work so that's in part that the subcommittee did, and then we will kind of see where next steps might take us from there. To kick us off, though, we would like to share the next community video. This one has a broader community impact focus. Diana, did a nice job of gathering the information, putting everything together. Anything you'd like to preview on this?
The only thing that I would add is throughout these interviews, and as you'll see in this video, even though restructuring we think would only impact the Wausau School District, as you'll hear, it actually would impact the broader Wausau community, and Mr. Dave Ekman from the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce explains why in this video. So go ahead and take a listen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Keith Hill, Superintendent of the Wausau School District.
And I'm Diana White. I'm the Communications and Marketing Coordinator here in the district.
Thanks for joining me today, Diana. So folks, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. We are continuing our conversation about the future of the Wausau School District. If you've been keeping up with us, we've been talking about solutions to a number of systemic challenges we face. One of those solutions could be a restructure of the entire district.
And a couple of pieces of information we want you to know. One, no decisions have been made. We are really in the education phase of this conversation. We have a web page on our website available where you can find all kinds of information and give your feedback. So please be sure to utilize that. In addition, there is a misconception out there that a referendum is needed to restructure the district, but we want to let you know that a referendum is not necessary. This is a decision the Wausau School Board does have the authority to make.
Yeah, those are important points. And while we are certainly continuing to take feedback, we value your feedback and educate the community and the staff about this situation, know that we are also going to shift into a slightly different phase now. We've been sharing the challenges and the overarching themes and concepts around this, but starting on Monday and each board meeting following, we are going to really move into more of a plan, analysis, and outcomes phase. So we hope you tune in so that you can see what it is we're really trying to achieve for our students and our staff, our families, and our community.
And really the key takeaway is that we just want spaces where our students and staff can thrive. At this time, though, what we'd like to do is continue our video series at this point. This time, you're going to hear perspectives about why this conversation is important, not only for our Wausau School District, but actually for the broader community. Wausau, home to about 40,000 people. And at the very heart of it, the Wausau School District, a place where students and staff learn and grow. But barriers like differences in student access to programming and declining enrollment are starting to get in the way of that. Career and Technical Education Coordinator John Winter sees those barriers firsthand.
I think of a lot of students at Wausau West that may not be able to get into the automotive program just based simply on a schedule. We have an amazing facility at Wausau East for automotive, but yet not every student has access to it. And we have amazing teachers in areas like engineering, and students at Wausau East, because of a schedule or because of transportation, may not be able to have access to that.
President and CEO of the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce, Dave Ekman, sees them too and wholeheartedly agrees it's time for change.
Change is not easy, but it's important right now for the future of this city and the school district's position in it. Critically important.
He was part of the subcommittees this summer, studying challenges facing the district and talking about potential solutions. And he'll tell you this conversation is actually about much more than just our school district. It's about the future of the Wausau community and the very things that make it thrive, including business and industry.
We have industry drivers. We have healthcare. We have finance insurance. We have manufacturing. We have commercial retail services. And with that, having the education system part of that, helping to drive that forward, that's our economic well-being. All of those companies here that that operate in those industry sectors, they create high-value paying jobs. Those jobs produce revenues for the community. Those revenues flow to the public good, which is education. And so the importance of where we're at today is we have to, as a community, help our education system to reposition. We live in a 21st century economy, which is rapidly changing daily, and the education system is part of it. And it's going to require us to look at things differently. It might make us even more uncomfortable than we've ever been before. But the alignment which must occur has to happen here in the school district's a system. And it's an integral system as to the future of this community and working with business and industry.
President of the Wisconsin Builders Association and Wausau School Board member Corey Sillers could not agree more. He says the partnership between businesses and the school district is not just important, it's vital.
As a builder, as a local business, we need to do whatever it takes to create the workforce, get more employees, and spur any interest that the students have.
That's why he's excited about a potential restructure of the Wausau School District, because not only would students have access to the same programs, they would have even more opportunities to learn about the many career options available to them.
Restructuring the way the schools are set up and really focusing on expanding the student's mind and just opening their eyes to what's available is a major importance for businesses, for the trades, for manufacturing in the Wausau area, and for the students themselves, just to get them to realize all the different things they could potentially do in life.
What we do have are companies here that are willing to grow. We grow our own here. And growing our own through our K-12 is going to be part of our future, and it's going to be a competitive part of our future. We don't do it, we lose. We will not compete. Every community is doing it. Wausau needs to do it too.
Because truly, we're all one Wausau, where we work together, solve problems, create solutions, and support each other along the way, which is why this community is such a great place to call home. And even though talking about closing and merging schools is a difficult and emotional conversation to have, Sillers wants you to remember that it's the people in our district that make this a great place to be. It's not the buildings themselves.
You have to realize that you can have that experience because of the staff, no matter what building you're in.
Because all anyone wants in this community is a chance to thrive. And as the heart of the Wausau community, we owe it to our students to make sure that they're set up for success well beyond the time they're with us. And restructuring may just be the key needed to open that door.
I get excited about the idea that, you know, a restructure plan could open the door for students, for all students to access all programs. And that's very exciting, not only for our students, but it's exciting for our community and the businesses and the workforce that our graduates eventually will enter.
So, Diana, it is really exciting to hear the possible impact that these changes to our district could really have on the broader community.
Absolutely. And we just want you to know that there are, like I mentioned before, a lot of resources out there for you to get informed. If you just go to our website, that's wausauschools.org, click on About WSD, and then the Future of the Wausau School District, that'll take you to all that information. And while you're there, you can get answers to frequently asked questions, and you can actually watch our public meetings that we've held. So those are recorded in there for you as a resource. So we do encourage you to head there. You should also tune in to our board meetings. They are on December 12th and again on the 19th. And then in January, they are on the second and fourth Monday of the month at 5 p.m. You can join us in person here at Longfellow, or they are live streamed as always. And a link to that is available on our website.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing all that. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I know you are concerned about the future of the district and the children and the community. And again, we've heard again today some of the exciting news about the possible future of our district. So thank you for taking the time. We look forward to continued conversations with
Yes.
you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Diana. Questions or reactions to the information contained in that? So we'll send that out when? Tomorrow morning to the, and that goes to the staff and the families, so, yeah. Question? Thanks, Corey, for being a part of it. Thanks, John, for being a part of it. Yes.
The only thing I wanted to add was, and it was brought up on Wednesday at Wausau East, was about potential timeline. And I think we should restate that our initial discussions a few weeks back were not before 24, 25.
Correct. Yeah, the fall of '24 would be a fast timeline. You know, that would require a decision this winter, about a year of planning, and so that gets us to that fall. It could be longer. I'm just, you know, when people are asking about a timeline, I guess I want people to know it's definitely not next fall. And a lot of work has to be done, and the board has to have time to process all of these options and make some decisions. Thank you for bringing that up. All right. Here we go. So getting into some analysis, and remember, these are our draft. You know, again, we've mentioned this before. We typically bring you kind of finished documents. In this case, we really want to hear what the board is thinking and others as we go forward. So this is just kind of a standard process. Analyze the risk. If we do this, what risks are we opening ourselves up to? So one, people talk about that families may choose to leave this district, right? You know, if they're not happy with what we decide, if they're out on the outskirts, that could happen. Staff may not be happy with this, and they could choose to leave as well. Bus transportation, that's a big question mark. They could get longer. Number 4, if we went in the direction of scenario A, for instance, that could add another school transition. So parents talk about the fact they could have a child in 4 different schools. Yep, that's something we want to be fully aware of. Some of the schools may have some tight enrollments, right? We're looking at that. And then people have talked about some of the traditions that may be lost, right? The law game has been mentioned, but there are others. We've got some wonderful things going on. So let's be mindful of some of those risks. And again, because, back up one more, Cassie. I don't know if there are probably others. This was a list. I don't know if anybody thinks we're missing any significant risks that should be added as we move forward. And if not tonight, maybe that comes to you later. All right, we'll keep going then. If we do not pursue this project, again, there are risks. We know that our open enrollment trend is negative for us. More families leave than come in, so that's already happening. And if we don't make some changes, that could continue. We would project that would continue. Declining enrollment will lead to staff and program reductions. Students, one of the main drivers here is that students would continue to have unequal access to programming. Major area of concern. The different staff conditions, those disparate conditions would continue. Operational costs continue to outstrip our revenues, and revenues would decrease due to declining enrollments. I should probably say per pupil, but yes. Anything that people would add to that list?
I wouldn't, not to add to the list, but just on the topic of people potentially leaving the district if we change, or that they already are if we don't. So after a couple of meetings where that's been brought up, because it was brought up and DC Everest was mentioned as an option, and so I looked at some of the numbers at DC Everest, and I'm not saying that we should just copy everything DC Everest does. But when I look, and they have an enrollment gain of open enrollment in 22-23 of 109 students on the positive, and we have the opposite problem. We have a loss of 243 students. No, I don't think we have to copy them, but I think that should make us take a look at what they're doing, because something's working. And when I look at their elementary schools, for example, their elementary school sizes are 321, 123, 480, 490, 532, 403, an average of a little under 400. And if you look at the sizes, just at the first example we looked at the last meeting, we were looking at an average of 238 in those schools. So if we wanted to be on an average size of 391, we would have to close 5 or 6 schools. I'm sorry, our current sizes are an average of 238, so we would have to close like 5 schools if we wanted to get to that average like Everest has, which happens to be what the parents proposed that we looked at that last meeting. And then if we look at that example A from November, with that consolidation, that brought us to an average of 324. So still smaller, bigger than we have now, certainly not large mega schools. So it's just one scenario that we've discussed, but I just thought it was interesting to take a look at what DC Everest is doing in terms of their school sizes and their efficiencies. And I think it's just a good thing to look at when we're thinking about whether students or families will leave or whether they'll come here. And there's other reasons for leaving and joining, of course, but so I just thought that was some interesting information after attending the same meetings you did where that was brought up.
Good comparisons. Thank you. Other thoughts?
So go kind of along those lines about the enrollment out versus enrollment in. Back at the end of October, Dr. Hiltz, there was a document shared. There had been some analysis done in terms of why people were leaving.
Yes.
And there's 11 reasons that were called out. Needing project-based school, started 4K near childcare, concerns about school board politics, continuation of Montessori program, concerns about student behavior, concerns about keeping parents informed, school safety, like smaller schools, repeated talk about closing elementary schools, more GT support, and more curriculum in the virtual school. So of those 11, I'm only counting 3 that get hit with any type of discussion here. I just want to make sure that we're thinking broad enough, because based on this information, I would disagree that we were going to positively impact the enrollment out.
Which 3 were you thinking would be possibly impacted?
Well, it seems like you could impact the project-based learning, GT support, and I didn't know if a Montessori program, if that were to expand.
I would definitely add behavioral support to that. That would be a huge factor. That's one of the things we're constantly talking about, that we would like to be able to have increased behavioral support instead of being spread so thin.
Right. Well,
among multiple buildings.
We just did that, right?
Now take that same thing and put them in 8 or 9 buildings instead of 13 buildings. Now you have the students and the staff actually there with the students.
Right, but you have same ratios. We're not talking about, I haven't seen anything about adding staff in this. Right.
Well, we have, because we've talked about if there's efficiencies saved from positions, that those could be changed into a more of a supporting role. But it also isn't just about staff per student. It's also staff being there with the student as opposed to traveling between multiple schools or losing staff because we struggle to keep staff that don't have one school to stay at. All those types of things that surround having, the sort of right size school, whatever size that is.
Okay.
So I think those are all things that you try to
So maybe that's
address.
4.
I would add that
If
one
you
to
throw
the list, yeah.
behavioral in there, that's 4. There's
And
several more.
childcare.
Childcare would be a big one.
Childcare was one of the major in that list that you had. Some are very, very small contributions. The childcare was one of the main, and so our ability to impact that would be significant.
We've had a number of people at our meetings talk about how they have some students in the district, but they've had to put other students of their own out of the district just because of childcare. And then it's like, well, now that they're in kindergarten and first grade, now do I switch them back? Right. Now they don't need childcare anymore, but they've spent 3 or 4 years at a district that has childcare. So that's a big one.
But just to be clear, we could impact the childcare issue without going through a full-blown district restructuring. Based on
Somebody
previous
could,
discussion.
yeah, somebody could. One of the solutions that's emerging in our community-wide conversations is about working with our current providers to offer some spaces at low to no cost so that they can create a more sustainable program and keep their staff. And if we happen to be that organization, not only could we expand the capacity to offer high-quality childcare, but we could secure some of those spaces for our own staff, which also helps them retain.
Pat brings up a issue that I don't know we have talked about, and not that you have an answer at this point. You said that, I think the number was that there would be like 9 extra teachers, right, that could become part of support staff. But I'm kind of wondering, Pat, aren't you more talking about the new staff that of the people services that were,
Correct.
you know, hired under the 4 million, right? And so how would those staff get redivided? Obviously, every school would have a full support staff, and we should actually have extra of those. Is that a true statement?
Well, if you keep the ratios the same, if you move students, you have to move an FTE or something with that, assuming that you can't split people, otherwise they're still transitioning schools, which Lance just identified as a negative for staff retention.
But every school doesn't have the same
Correct.
support staff currently.
Correct. Right.
That's one of the problems. We don't have every school fully staffed.
Yeah, and we staff based on student need and enrollment. So we, and Lance referenced it earlier, to be able to, to focus our staff into single buildings allows them to, work more as a team, allows them to be there for students, but also for staff as resources. I was talking to some of our staff this morning who are highly skilled in student behavior and management and instruction. And, again, we're splitting them between 13 elementary schools, so it's really difficult for them to get to all the people who need their assistance. So again, concentrating our staff into fewer buildings allows them to be more effective too.
And the other thing, we've talked about those positions that could possibly be saved. And what we've also said each time is we could also lower class sizes and use those positions for that purpose, which I think is something we'll have to explore, because that, I think, is a huge attraction, not only for retaining staff, but for attracting families to want to stay in the district. Perhaps even from the student's side or from the family side, even more important than it maybe should be compared to what the research says about the importance of class size, but perception is reality when parents are choosing where to go. And if they perceive that a smaller class size is that much better, I think that's something we've got to look at if we go down this path.
Good, thank you.
I also
go ahead.
I also think of the work-life balance for the teachers that are having, or the support staff that have to go and travel to these different schools. I think of their own family life. How are they able to juggle doing all that? And I think that this would be a positive for them, for their own personal well-being as well.
Yeah, I think we heard that from Mr. Stashik in one of the previous videos. Yep, thank you. All right, what's next on the, we've talked about this a little bit. Again, these are just examples. We can flesh this out. We know that some of the things we're trying to pursue, right? Student access to programming, really students getting the help they need when they need it. And that's really more that elementary, making sure we have those full teams available. Be a more attractive employer, expanding programming, with some of the funds that we could save by not duplicating efforts, which of course is some of that efficient use of resources. And we've talked about some of the cons already, really as risks. I think I wanted to share this one more time because we shared it before, but I think this kind of gets folded into those risks. And in the next slide, it's really about more the measurable outcomes. So unless somebody has questions or comments about this, we could start talking about those outcomes. Okay, Cassie, you want to go forward? So again, big word draft. We're in the ballpark, but we're not 100% guaranteeing these numbers, but these are the kinds of outcomes that excite us about. This is why we're engaged in this conversation. These are things that we want to be held accountable for. Once we get, these would be something, we would bring these goals for board approval, so let's talk about what these look like. So 1, all high school students have equal access to programming. If we were to do this merger of the high schools, that's something that would be guaranteed. They'd be all in the same system. We would set a goal to save some dollars in operations. $2 million isn't out of the question. We want to, Mr. Tess and his team and Mr. Seiler were kind of working on that. And again, these are multi-year goals. right? But to save 2 million in operations could be one of our goals. Those open enrolled students, if we were to just get back to even, which is 239, I heard 243, somewhere in that ballpark, that's about $1.5 million in revenue. Expand the access to high-quality childcare with a measurable number. What we've been talking to some local providers, depending on the space that gets provided, up to 200 children. Expand WIA sports, expand or create intramural sports programs. And again, I haven't gotten any confirmation from our ADs or principals, but we will. We're kind of in this ballpark, right? How many sports might we be able to add for kids? Future facility maintenance and improvements, 15 million, something like that. Right size our staffing over 5 years. I wrote that a little more generic because, for instance, right now we have staff positions that we cannot fill. And when we can't fill those positions, that puts a lot of stress on our existing staff. So right sizing the staff, I'm not sure what number we might add to that. Let me go to the next slide. Then what I'd like to know from folks is, what do you think about these outcomes? If you have something you would add, questions about some of the numbers, but we'll finish up this list. Could we add one resource teacher per elementary school, right? Whether it's, that would be based on student need. Could we increase the number of classroom support staff by one? That doesn't even get to the custodians and nutrition services staff as well. Reduce the number of traveling staff by some number. Not sure what that might look like yet. I don't know when we'd have to get to a model before we could really analyze that. And then at some point we need to talk to our staff and our students and our parents about their level of satisfaction, and can we impact that through this change in a positive way, of course. And could we increase the number of secondary school course offerings, again, by eliminating duplication of efforts? So those were the 15 that we came up with. Again, we're in the ballpark. This is an ongoing conversation. I wonder what the board's reaction to those would be.
I just want a couple of clarifications.
Yep.
The 2 million in operational savings, is that, I'm assuming that's 2 million a year?
Correct. Yes.
So
that's operational, right?
2 million a year post-implementation.
Correct. Yep.
Ongoing.
Yes. Yep. That would be, building maintenance costs, some staff costs, any combination of those.
Okay. And then the 12, 13, 14, about increasing student, staff, and parent satisfaction. And the distinction that I want to make sure I understand is, we've talked a lot about, prior to this and in here, we talk about student, staff, parent experience.
Yes.
Now we're talking about, we're going to measure satisfaction.
Correct.
I can be satisfied with my experience, even though it's very different than Karen's.
Yes.
So somehow I think you need to turn this into increasing staff experience, student experience, through whatever tangible metrics you're going to put into that. Like, as a staff person, whatever you guys have on, documented that is causing a negative staff experience, that's what we should be looking at, saying, do we check off these
Right.
4 things?
Excellent.
Same with, with students, parents, whatever.
Yes.
I get leery when I see satisfaction, because it's relevant to what you know today.
Absolutely. And we use it as a catch-all term, but you're right. We want to be specific in our measures. Thank you.
Dr. Hiltzer, we are already in some areas short-staffed. So right sizing really means filling everything and not losing any staff in a way.
Make sure we're using the right word. So
Yeah.
not losing any staff. So generally what we're talking about is, yes, being able to fill all of our positions. No existing staff would lose their jobs through this process, but we may reduce some staff or shift staffing depending on enrollments and student needs. Does that answer your question, or?
Well, I want to I guess you did just say that we're not looking to get rid of any staff.
Correct.
Because we're short.
Yeah,
Right.
that was one
We
of
have
the,
open positions.
One of the questions in the elementary subcommittee meeting from the parents was, well, if if schools were combined, would any staff get fired? And so one of the answer is no.
Right.
And one of the reasons for that is even if there were some efficiencies, we're hiring every single year. So we just wouldn't hire as many new staff because every single year we're hiring more staff. So so no one would get fired that was really what the question was.
Right,
The answer to that one is very clear. But whether there's some efficiencies gained either because we have positions that currently aren't filled or we don't need in the future, I mean, that may happen, but nobody would get terminated because of it.
And that's why I'm asking about the right sizing. Sometimes that term is, like you're adjusting and getting rid of people or kind of
Right.
thing, and we're not looking to get rid of anybody.
Correct. Thank you.
One other question I had, just on the WIA sports, it says increase 2 for each gender over the next 5 years. Are there currently WIA sports that we're not engaged in because of our structure?
Yes.
So which ones are those?
Boys swimming would be one. Yep. Guys volleyball. Yep.
Lacrosse is coming soon.
Yep.
Right.
Girls wrestling, I think is another one. There's a few, yeah.
Okay. And for whatever reason, the co-op is not an option for those like we do with girls hockey and things like that?
Between the two schools, I know we tried to do that with, and I don't know if we want to, how deeply we want to get into that
I'm just
conversation
curious.
tonight, but yeah, my understanding is co-op is not an option.
Okay.
But if once we, and correct me if I'm wrong, once if the board made a decision to merge the schools, that combination could take place immediately, even before we physically combine it, yeah.
We don't, to co-op hockey, we don't meet the co-op requirements.
Okay.
Meaning that West can sustain a hockey team on their own, therefore by combining, we could potentially cut kids, which doesn't fulfill a co-op requirement.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you.
So there's parameters to have a co-op, and we don't hit some of those parameters.
Right. Yep.
If we
Good.
co-op East and West.
Thank you. Anything else on these? Yep.
Two things that I know came up in the subcommittee meetings that I viewed as positive potential outcomes with a merger like this. One was related to the ADs, mentioning that when there was a combination of the funding that right now is split between two high schools, of course, there's now, hopefully some efficiencies that lead to increased dollars that might be able to trickle down to the elementary programming where we could sustain maybe some better sports opportunities for kids there that I found really appealing for a number of reasons that, we've all seen tremendous growth in travel sports, and it has become pretty inequitable from a financial standpoint, and our lower income students and families can't typically participate, and so their first exposure to athletics from an affordability standpoint doesn't come until the middle school, high school years, when sometimes you're kind of behind the eight ball because a lot of kids have already been doing whatever that sport is since they were 5 years old. And so I really found that to be an appealing option, an opportunity as a potential outcome in order to engage increased number of students in our district who right now don't have access to some of that programming. So I think that might be one that I would love to see on this list. Additionally, a part of the conversation this summer as well was from some of the community members sharing that they have access to funding where they would love to donate equipment or something that would be supportive to a robotics lab, for example, or something from an academic standpoint. I don't know what that is. I think that's the teachers have all of the creative ideas about what they might want, but I would love to see that too, because I think that's the community piece that we continued to hear that there is funding, but they have really held back giving it because they didn't weren't able to divide.
Right.
Whereas if there was a merger, they would really love to get behind something like that. So I guess I would love to see people at the high school level, teachers, kind of dream big about what that would look like, and then there to be, some effort towards these community business owners who have sort of said, hey, we're out here, we want to do that, and have that be another outcome that is academic related and supporting, some new programming or better programming for our students that, again, is attractive and appealing to a move in this direction.
Thank you.
One other question on athletics. Someone asked me this, and I did not know the answer. I think the answer is yes, but if the schools combine, if there's 2 varsity sports, right, one at East, one at West, assume that this would go through into one high school, there's then only one varsity, right? You can't have multiple varsities. So just so everyone's clear on that.
I think on the back end of that, the other thing, possibility, like if you take Stash, for example, who still has P.J. Jacobs and Ben Franklin, so they still have 2 ninth grade teams. They often field multiple lower level teams at that level. So they might split and have 2 freshman teams, or maybe some years when their numbers are huge, 3 freshman teams. So I think obviously that's down the roads, but we kick it around as athletic directors within the conference. You might get to a point where we're able to offer more opportunities at those lower levels, but you are correct in saying that there would only be one varsity.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
Adding to what Karen mentioned, and you've given some examples like this in meetings already, you could come up with examples now of things that we only have one of, that one high school has, the other high school doesn't.
Oh.
So one high school has this equipment, and so they can do auto diesel here, and they can't at this high school. And at this high school, they can do this, and they can't, students at the other high school can't do it. And some of that is funded through the district, and some of that has been community funded as well, and it only was funded for one or the other. So we've already got some examples like that you could touch on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. John Winter probably knows, would know it best, at least from the, from the career and tech ed. John, did you want to mention anything about that, or
A good example of that is like some of the robotics that was already mentioned. We've been able to take advantage of some industry support that want to see more automation in our curriculum, but a robotic arm is a very expensive piece. So, the idea behind it is, well, pick it up, put it on a truck, and drive it over to the other side of town. But that's not exact. There's a lot more that comes with it. Is training staff and making sure that your IT support is there. So. But yeah, there are several different examples that were already mentioned. Diesel mechanics, auto body and collision. We have a paint mixing booth over at Wausau East that is supported by the community as well. So several different examples like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Can I go back, Karen? You had made a point about sports and kids not starting till later. Was your outcome that you were looking for different than the intramural programming?
Yeah, because what I understood this to be is intramural programming, we're talking about at the high school level.
Correct.
Because there's now, increased students that maybe aren't all on varsity, for example. But there was mention in the subcommittee meetings that some of that would increase programming at the elementary level due to the excess funding. And so then it gives exposure to students who aren't otherwise having access to organized sports because of whatever their family demographics are.
Okay, I missed that part. Thank you. Good. Other comments or suggestions? And again, this list will come back. We'll continue to review this. So take some time, think about it, and let us know. All right. So let's talk about moving forward. So as the board would make some decisions about, restructuring, make one decision, it limits other decisions, also, forces some other directions. So what I'm thinking is that if we start with the end in mind and talk about the high school, that's, if the board can help us limit options there, that will determine some middle school options, that would determine then some elementary options, and then there's other decisions that could be made after that. So that's kind of the order that I'm proposing we tackle these scenarios in. So if you go to the next one, Cassie. So for instance, tonight, what I would like to do is go through 5 different high school options, 4 of which the subcommittee already looked at, and 1, like I mentioned, came out of a conversation at Wausau East. Much of this was work done by the subcommittees, but we want to make this very transparent to people who obviously were not in those subcommittees and are watching today. So let's talk first of all about what if we just moved enrollment boundaries. Cassie, could you go ahead? Well, forgot, this is the last slide that kind of came out of the last subcommittee meeting. And this again is to show the options that they reviewed. And that big green one in the middle, that's the one they felt had the most promise. That's the one we'll end up with tonight. Yeah, go ahead. So moving boundaries, next slide is just our boundaries, right? Just so people kind of have an idea. The river is our primary boundary. We would move that to the west to move roughly 260 students. You know, that number changes every day, frankly, but that's what we would do in this case. You want to go to the next one? There's our numbers, right? We'd have to move students to east. You can see some comparative numbers there too. Next slide, Cassie. So I pulled this list of those 13 outcomes just to have a continuation of a visual to look at, trying to decide if we simply balanced enrollments, which of those 13 would we expect to be able to achieve? So you'll see, the first one at the very top, improve student academic experiences. Question mark. I don't know if simply shifting students to the east would balance out, those experiences. So I don't think it would, but I'd have to look and see more. If the board is interested in that, we'd have to dig a little deeper and see what might come out of that. Same with academic and behavior supports. We would shift students, we would shift some staff, but we aren't really replicating or adding programming. We're just shifting students and staff. We would probably balance staff experiences and work conditions, right? We would have more staff on the east side. We would have the same size teams. Even that would vary because it depends now on student requests for courses, right? Really no cost savings. Consistent class sizes, that's really more of an elementary concept because class size at the secondary is really driven by course selection and numbers of sections. We would not bring the community together, has nothing to do with childcare, wouldn't right size the district, would not reduce the number of schools, and then the others are really more kind of question. We don't know about transportation yet. Staff collaboration, I put a question mark there because again, you do have more staff. You might increase the opportunity for collaboration on one side, you might reduce it on the other, right? Facilities, we wouldn't focus on one high school, and again, the intangibles is kind of a consistent question mark. That's going to come out of that. So pause, yeah, go ahead.
Just one question on that. So when we're talking about right-sizing the district for future needs, improving facilities by focusing on one high school, I think it would help as we go forward to state what are the goals? What does right-sizing mean? Right, because I always assume that it means that we're having the most efficient use of the facilities, right?
Yep.
So get them as close to capacity as we can, maximize the use of them. And depending on that definition, really impacts the way I look at a number of these on here.
Mm-hmm.
And the same for the first one, improving student academic co-curricular experiences. So if you had equal size schools, why wouldn't that accomplish that? Does that make sense? And
yes.
We don't have to get into it
Okay.
now. I'm just thinking going forward, it would be helpful to see the converse of that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, will do. Other questions or suggestions on? So again, this is a rough analysis of what we might be able to accomplish if we just shifted boundaries.
I think.
Right. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I know you're trying to use the same
Yes.
bullet points for each one, which is why some of them apply to elementary and some don't. And this one, it sort of only applies to this option. But one of the big issues is any of these things that you do check off as a positive, you have to put next to it that it's probably temporary. With a boundary change.
Yes, yes. And in the next one, there's also a boundary change, and that is one of the concerns. It's a temporary fix because those demographics are going to continue to shift. So, good point. Okay, let's keep moving forward. So now, at our last session, there was an interest in saying, why can't you just make East and West equal? So let's take a look and see what that might mean. So first of all, there are significant academic differences. Mr. Winters mentioned a few. There's way more than that. Also differences in sports. Now those numbers might not be accurate, I learned today, and this is already in board books, so we have to go back and confirm. But there are sports, athletic differences. For instance, there's boys swimming at East and not at West, and we've mentioned a few. But there are differences. And then clubs and activities, just different numbers. There are different size schools, different numbers of activities. So just to kind of give an idea to people, what kinds of differences are we talking about? So if you want to move forward,
Keith,
Cassie.
can we quantify the first one, the academic courses that differ between East and West?
Not yet. There's some things they're hard to differentiate because the names are different, but the course may be the same.
Okay.
Yeah,
I would like to see us get to, and I was asked that question, like, what are the differences?
Okay.
I would like to see, here's what is offered at West and not at East, and what's at East and not at West.
Yep, we can
And
keep
then,
working on it.
again, on the issue of it being temporary, even if you equaled it out and had the same quote-unquote offers at East and West, it doesn't actually mean you'd have the same classes at East and West. Because if more students want this class at East and more students want this class at West, well then this one's gonna have it at West and this one's gonna have it at East, and the ones that wanted the other one are kind of left out because there aren't enough.
Yes.
So you could have the same course offerings, but you couldn't likely have the same actual courses.
Right. And actually, in our early analysis, we couldn't even really offer the same course offerings. I'll talk about that in a minute here. You want to go forward, Cassie? So what would we have to do to create two equal high schools? One, move the boundaries like we talked about in option one, get the same number of kids, and shift the staff, of course. Create the same course book, create the same athletic options, same clubs and activities, and we really could not create the same schedule. It would be difficult because West is really built to house the flex, which means large lecture halls, smaller classrooms compared to East. So we probably wouldn't change the schedules, but just as a note. So if we did those things, here are the concerns. So one, because we're not saving, we're still replicating all of our efforts, right? And so we aren't going to have any really new finances in this particular change to fund courses or expansion of courses. And also due to staff certification requirements, we'd actually have to reduce the number of courses. I can't replicate the East Autos program at West. I can't replicate the Fab Lab on the other. They're too expensive, and the certifications and the skills of the staff just aren't available. So I would propose that we would have to actually reduce the number of courses. Same thing would be true for our co-curricular and our club activities. We would become equal by reducing, if we truly want equal. And as you've already mentioned, this is a temporary solution. And I didn't even include the piece about student choice in this. I would propose that this would, again, not accomplish many of our outcomes. But before we talk about that, questions on what I'm proposing here?
The only thing you're not addressing in any way, well, you have about financial constraints. This really doesn't fix any of the operational structure.
Right.
Right?
Right, yeah. If you go to the next slide, Cassie, it's that same list. We do get some cost savings, but that's by reducing programming. Right? Otherwise, everything else is kind of the same. And actually, Sorry, it's not quite the same. That top bullet, on the previous list, I actually had a question mark there, but here, because we're reducing opportunities, I would say you're not improving student academic or co-curricular experiences.
One thing I'd add is just because when I came into this conversation, in my mind, I thought moving boundaries is the least disruptive to the least amount of people. And it seemed like a really viable option. And, you know, in being a part of this conversation for as long as we were, it became really quickly clear that really the only thing that solves is using more of Wausau East's building for a temporary time until the demographic shift continues further and further to west, and we're in the same place, and we have to change the boundaries again if we want to refill east. And so I think it's just really important to understand it doesn't accomplish, and I know that's what you've just got done saying and explaining, but it really doesn't at all address the completely different experiences that are happening in both of the buildings at all. And I think that that's really one of the primary goals of this whole conversation. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Anything else on this one? All right, let's go forward. Third option, this was very exciting to us. Create one high school. We had proposed the West Campus for a few reasons, but a single 9-12 high school. If you move forward, Cassie. Our friends at Nexus helped us. We asked them if we wanted to put all 4 grade levels at West, as an example, what would we have to do? I know you can't read this. You can if you look at it on your own. But the red just kind of shows the areas that would need the most attention. And I want to draw your attention to that block on the far right. Those are current houses that we'd have to purchase and raise to expand our campus. If you go to the next slide, Cassie, it kind of captures what would have to happen. So West would need to expand by about 150,000 square feet in those areas listed there. Parking, stormwater systems was something which I didn't think about at all. And then, again, I mentioned having to purchase those homes. And I don't know what that would cost. So we would need a referendum. We just threw out, we have not done any analysis, just kind of a 50 to 100 million on top of what we're already investing. So as the committee saw this and saw that graphic, they pretty quickly said, as much as we love the outcomes that could come from this, we really didn't think it was a viable option. So I wonder, well, actually, let me just wrap up this scenario here. If you go to the next slide, Cassie, because it would check a lot of our boxes. We just don't think it's a viable option to pursue. But I wonder if the board has an opinion on that.
I'm just curious, was that same analysis done if to make East the 9 through 12 campus? What would that cost? Briefly,
it would be a huge additional cost. We haven't done any costing, but because the capacity would have to go from roughly 1,600 to about 2,400, that referendum cost would probably be similar. We just wouldn't have to buy houses. Because you're still having to add about 150,000 more square feet of space and the parking and everything else.
So in theory, because of the lack of real estate acquisition that's needed, that could be a more cost-effective option.
Correct. Yeah. The other question that comes up if we do that is, what do you do with an empty high school? And I don't have a good answer for that either. In other words, if we left our middle schools and middle schools as they are, for instance, and we moved all our students to West, what are we going to do with that beautiful campus? I don't have a good answer for that. Yeah. We could put some programming in it, or try to sell it. I'm not sure how much of a market there is for 150,000 square foot high school.
This isn't even realistic, but you would probably maintain that as a school and sell something that's more sellable, such as John Muir, because you're not going to get, what are you going to get for a school out on the northeast side of town?
That becomes our middle school.
Right. I'm
then we'd
not
sell
saying,
our two
I'm
middle
not saying that's
schools.
what we should
So,
do.
yeah.
But yeah, you'd probably have to go down that path.
Yeah. So again, if the board, any of these that you want to pursue more, I'm writing down your questions here, we are happy to do it. I don't, anyway, I'll ask you that question a little bit later if you think this is an option. Other questions on this one? Otherwise, Cass, you want to go to the next? The last two would create a single high school on two campuses, east and west. It's really just a question of which grade configuration. This first one is a 9-10 and an 11-12 configuration. So next slide, Cassie. So here is the main issue that we had with a 9-10, 11-12. Our 10th grade students, many of them needed access to advanced coursework, which is not the case for freshmen. They have kind of a set schedule almost with just a couple of options. So one of the concerns with this is, again, getting students access to that coursework. We would probably have to do a lot of duplication of courses being offered on the two campuses, which, as you'll see in the next, is less needed in the other scenario. Really hard to accelerate students. We would have to split more staff because of the duplication of programming. And the advantage is, though, all students would have equal access, right? They'd all be in the same system now. One of our main outcomes, so that's really good. We would have balanced student enrollments. And we do have that larger concentration of students, so we could expand coursework perhaps. If you go to the next one, Cassie, that same graphic, I think we achieve many of our outcomes. We may not improve student academic experiences because of that duplication. Same with the cost savings in this model. Otherwise, it's a pretty good option. Some of you were in that secondary subcommittee and were part of this conversation. I'm not sure what else you would add to this.
Keith, can you clarify, what do you mean by duplication? Improve student academic co-curricular experiences. Will duplication limit improvements?
Right. So so sophomores will take, junior, senior level courses. So if in order to make that possible on the 9-10 campus, we would have to create those course offerings on that campus. Whereas in the next scenario you'll see, the 8, 9, 10, 12, we're proposing that 9th graders really don't need a lot of access to advanced coursework, except in a few cases like math and a few others. But it's far limited compared to sophomores. So we think we'd have to duplicate a lot more of our advanced courses on this 9-10 campus that we wouldn't with an 8-9.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the other significant drawbacks to this design was the disruption to kind of growing culture, mentorship, leadership opportunities, and just depth of growth within any kind of co-curricular and even some of the typical, so like the drama program or a music program or DECA, for example, where there's a lot of mentorship and modeling of the upperclassmen to lowerclassmen. And if you remove the 9-10 completely from 11-12, it's super choppy, clunky, disruptive. The 9th and 10th graders really miss out on the modeling and leadership that come from the upperclassmen, as do the staff who really pour into those lowerclassmen and really develop great relationships. I mean, those of us who have had students, have really appreciated what comes with that continued exposure and relationship over time. And so the 9, 10, 11, 12 campus really was so disruptive in that process versus 10 through 12 provides still some of that
Upperclassmen
opportunity.
mentorship.
Yeah, exactly. And if we brought in 8, 9, all of a sudden 8 really gets a new level of mentorship and modeling from the freshmen. That might be a great positive for them, and, that was another, drawback, I think, to this, that was discussed in the subcommittees as
Right.
well.
Thank
So.
you.
And the inverse of that is the ninth and 10th grade would not be exposed to some of the other behaviors you don't want them to see.
For sure.
I mentioned that in
I'm
the next
just,
slide.
I'm just throwing that out. I mean, I say it mostly in jest, but
Yeah.
it is a possibility.
Yep.
We know that there's a lot of districts that do the 8, 9 junior high and the 10, 12 senior high. That's the next one you're going to get to. Do you know of any doing 9, 10 at one school and 11, 12 at another?
Do you?
There are a few. One that I'm thinking of is in the kind of the Milwaukee suburbs, Milwaukee ring. A big difference though is that those two buildings essentially share a campus. So even though they have a 9, 10, 11, 12, you can easily walk from one to the other. So it'd be a very different situation than what we have here.
Right. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, let's do the last one here. So this, again, this is the one that the subcommittee felt had the most potential. 8, 9, we would again propose it at East, 10, 12 at West. Concerns would be the capacity of the building. West has had up to 1,800 students around that year 2000, but when we would project to go over their operating capacity of 1,600 in the next, for a few years. We can do it, it'll be tight. The other thing that came up is that in an 8, 9 building, if you have 8th and 9th grade students taking courses together, 9th graders are getting credit, 8th graders are not. Little unusual, and I think that's something you could work out in course offerings. But those were just a couple of things that came up. Advantages you can see there. Again, because we aren't duplicating efforts, we would have some funds we could reinvest into expanding course offerings, expanding co-curricular options. There's that 9th graders being kept younger for a while. Don't let them go to the dance. Sorry. So that actually came out of a conversation I had with somebody else. But and then tailor experiences to the adolescent. We got kind of excited. One of the things that we heard was in another district, they created this structure. And initially that 8th, 9th building was really positive and unique, but it just kind of lost a focus and it kind of degraded over time. So we started thinking about what could that 8th, 9th grade year look like? And we think one thing that's very unique is you would have 8th graders who have developed some pretty strong academic skills by this point. They're not required to take anything for credit. What could we do that would be really unique in that space to provide them some inspiration? And we don't know yet. It's just a wondering more than anything else. It could be a really unique opportunity. So last slide on this one. Oops. This is that vision we told you about. This would represent what we're talking about. And we've gone through it before. We could certainly talk about it. But there's that inspiration and planning in the junior high. And then one more slide just kind of shows what we think we can achieve, which is most of what we're looking as favorable. So questions, comments, suggestions?
You mentioned the selection for West as the landing spot. A lot of it sounds like it had to do with the fact that West has a little more capacity, like 100 more students or so. And I wasn't in the secondary meeting, so I'm just wondering, did you talk about, East has more acreage and more room for parking and is newer and that kind of thing? What other discussions were there around the location of where the high school itself should be?
Sure. We did. We talked about it a little bit. And frankly, there's two things that kind of shifted us toward West. Partly is the fact that we currently have referendum dollars where we can do some work if we need to make this happen. Secondly is the proximity to industry, employers, and higher education. We have strong relationships with many of our partners, and so we thought that would be a better place for that senior campus.
Right, and when you look at central location, in addition just from, I mean, that has the majority of the students that would be then traveling a much greater distance versus, you know, if a smaller number of students on the east side, which continues to shrink, you know, would be traveling to a more central location versus west side students going a far distance as well, which was certainly another part that brought that west more to the top in the conversation.
I think that the capacity issue at West is real because that could absolutely negatively impact the student experience and staff experience, quite frankly. I know the enrollment was up. Whatever it's at right now, it's busy. Right? I mean, in passing times, it's not a good experience for the kids.
Okay.
To make that more intense, I think would be starting to go down the hill.
Gotcha.
You mentioned that it would be very tight for a short time, and I apologize, I don't remember the enrollment curve that we looked at not long ago. Do you have any more information on that, on what the years were, and what it would be over the next 2 years versus 8 years from now?
Yeah, it was in a previous presentation.
I
I don't
can
have
pull it up
it,
if
but
you don't have it.
it was about 3 years, and I think the enrollment, and I'm gonna look at Bob because he's always good at this. He's probably looking it up right now. I think we were upwards of, was it over 1,700 for a few years?
It gets to its highest in 24, 25 at 1790.
Or 18.
Capacity of 1694.
Yep.
To about 100.
Yep.
Which might be before we even.
Right,
Possibly.
That's what I was thinking, Karen. That it wouldn't
Possibly,
be
yes.
implemented.
But were you saying that you think it's going, our numbers show that it's going down after that? That's the part I was wondering.
Pretty flat. It goes up for a couple of years until that year, and then it goes down a little bit, and pretty flat, and then down a little bit more after that. So
Yeah.
27, 28, it's at capacity.
Yeah.
We also talked about other programming that could draw students out of the actual building.
Yeah, you know.
Some of our alternative approach.
Yeah, and between EEA and Alt High and others, plus we are part of the attraction to this senior high is really getting kids into work-based learning, more into higher education, right? During high school, which would again offer them opportunities to be off campus, more so engaging more of that real world learning.
So you're anticipating then that some of the students might be going to NTC or the university and picking up classes there, which would impact the number of students on campus?
Correct, yes, yeah. And again, work-based learning, there's some wonderful work-based learning opportunities that we would like to leverage more.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's a bad option. I was there around those times where there were that many kids there in the 90s. I'm just thinking in my mind of all the extra space there is at Wausau East, and for extracurricular activities and athletic fields and parking, and it's such a beautiful new building.
It is.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? If we were to head down the 8, 9, 10, 12 option, and we have some facility differences, like the automotive program at East, and now we just have potentially 8th and 9th graders there.
Right.
But we want that to be a possibility for our 10th through 12th graders.
Yes.
And it's housed at the other building.
Yep.
Is the plan to move that to the 10th through 12th grader building? What does that look like?
That's one of our pain points, if you will. We've talked about some options, and I don't know, Mark or John, if you want to add, but basically, there's a few options. So obviously, our 8th and 9th graders would have access to the best autos lab in the state, right? Great, which is great. Our 10th, so a couple options. One would be, they go over to 10, 12, and Watia buys us a shuttle, and we take them back over for the for the autos class, right? Two, John Winter has created an accelerated pathway that gets students certainly by junior year, am I right, John, to NTC? So there'd be 1 year they wouldn't be, 1 year they'd be with us, the next 2 they'd probably be at NTC for an accelerated pathway. Another option that came up, which is creative, is to create an automotive charter school, where you'd create a cohort of students, maybe 25 per year. I'm not sure what the numbers would be, but but every student could be exposed to autos, right? And then in their 10th through 12th grade year, they just stay there, and they do a cohort of their core classes plus their autos classes, right? Or maybe it's a 1 year. So there's some things we could do, but that one, a lot of exploration. We've been meeting with Watia and you have something else, John?
I would just add one more option that we've kind of discussed, and we've had several meetings with our partners out at NTC, but NTC's got a pretty fabulous facility out there, and we just having some initial conversations about what ifs kind of scenarios, and could we potentially maybe leverage their facility, you know, on the short-term basis is another possibility. So kind of looking at all of those different options and trying to figure out, you know, in partnership with Watia and our business and industry, you know, we were meeting with them last week as well. So just trying to collaborate with everybody, trying to do what's best for not only our students but our industry partners.
Yeah. And, you know, long-term, if this goes through, would we move that lab? I don't know, it would be expensive. That would be another option, you know, down the road perhaps.
Did you,
or recreate it.
so when you were looking at some of the expense and some of the, you know, the pros and cons of the different locations, did you look at what West has that would have to move to East if we put the high school there versus what East has that would have to move to West if we put the senior high there? If we start thinking about things like, you know, the cost of having to move the auto lab, maybe that's more than the cost of adding on 110 capacity at East to make it have the same capacity as West has. And I'm not here to try to push for Wausau East to be the senior high. It's just I wasn't at the meetings where it fell on West, so it's just part of me comes out where I'm trying to think about what about this?
Yeah.
You know,
No,
why
that's
not?
great.
Why not the other school? I'm just wondering what all was discussed to come to that decision.
I know people want to know that very question, which is why I was asking some of those earlier.
Yeah.
Why? The East versus West? What are some of the tangible things that went into those decisions?
I think the one that jumps out right away is West already has 110 or so more capacity, so that pops out right away. But then there's all these other things you start thinking about that East has that West doesn't have, and
Well, and then you get to the community unity aspects of it. I don't even know if we want to go there now, but AP versus IB. I assume that hasn't been decided. Like in this option, I'm sorry, in the 8, 9, and then 10 through 12 campus.
Right. I think we'd do both. We'd offer both.
Okay. And then mod versus block.
Right, we haven't talked about schedules.
Yeah.
Like I said, there would be a good year's worth of work to talk about how these schools would come together and not just replicate, but really elevate, you know, what we want the kids to, and the staff, what their experience to be.
is the West or maybe I should say it this way, the West capacity number is influenced by having the mod schedule though, right?
You know, I don't know how, are you saying yes, Jennifer? Do you know?
It's a yes and really, this is, I just want to clarify, having been part of the secondary subcommittee in the summer, we did not get to a lot of this detail, and the secondary subcommittee did not look at whether East or West would be the best place for a 10-12 campus, for example, because it's so hard to study unless we know that's the direction. So I think if the board, for example, were to decide, yes, go get a proposal for 8, 9, and 10, 12, we could put together some level of detail, and then with that, I think you could do a really good analysis of East versus West. We have some ideas, but we didn't do a lot of the in-depth financial study, as Keith suggested. As far as does Does the capacity impact the schedule? I don't know if it's the capacity alone, but the design. As you mentioned earlier, Wausau West was designed with FlexMod in mind. So that creates some natural opportunities in that building that if we wanted the 10-12 building to be a FlexMod, if we felt that was the best developmentally for that age group, West is suited to that. If we thought a different schedule was best suited to 10-12, then you'd look at it differently.
There's that too.
Yeah, I just think, because the east is actually bigger than west in terms of square footage. I just don't know where that square footage might be in the field house, or the hallways might be wider, or I don't, who knows? It might not, it's not classroom space. I'm just wondering if, if you decided that the traditional schedule was better than the mod schedule, for example, does the capacity at West drop? Because now you're not maximizing those large group rooms and the small rooms, and I don't know the answer to those questions, but and maybe what you're saying is you don't want to spend thousands of hours of getting into the details of all those questions until we give you some direction that we're actually interested in that.
Yes, thank you.
Is that what I'm getting out of that? Okay.
So how do we get to some level of decision-making without detail?
So these were the options we ran through, right? Next slide. So here's what I'm wondering. Can the board, do you want to limit any of those options we just looked at? And what additional information do you need?
I'm assuming you mean what additional information do we need to limit?
Correct.
Any of those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole bunch of other information.
Yeah.
On any of them. Okay.
Well, one of the reasons we had this presentation tonight is because at the last meeting we asked you present on the options, even if you thought the options weren't very viable, so that we could have the discussion in public.
Right.
The committee meetings were public too, just this one's televised. So, so I think that's a good idea. If there's any that the board says this is out, then you don't have to spend more time studying it.
Well, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the enrollment boundaries, because that'll fix the issue, but temporarily.
And I'm not even sure how much of a fix it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the creating 2 equal high schools, I don't know how they would be equal, because it depends on what classes the students choose. So I don't know if that would be worth looking into more. That's just what I'm thinking, but
Right.
it depends what the rest of the board thinks. I get it would be equal by moving bodies of the students, but what we provide to the students as far as classes and athletics.
Right. It would be a challenge to make them truly equal, hence why they're in quotes.
And much like the realization you came to in the committee, I don't see any possibility of us passing a referendum to build I wouldn't even want to ask for it, to build one high school.
And again, that number was, obviously hugely broad, 50 to 100 million. It's going to be somewhere in there, but, if,
And buying houses up.
Yeah.
How
unless you want to try it at East again, we're talking about.
And yeah, that's actually what I was just going to say. I would like to see more information. My opinion, from what I've seen here and heard, and from a lot of different stakeholders, the 9 through 12 on one campus, is that not the ideal scenario? I mean, if we were to start this from scratch and begin building schools, is there any reason we wouldn't want 9 through 12 on one campus?
I don't know.
The
Not
sheer
that I can
size?
think of.
Pardon?
The sheer size of number of students and number of classrooms you need to get the
Well, but everything we're talking
Per
about,
pupil
scale
is-
is what we're after,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
The only negative probably would be is if you think there's quite an advantage of having ninth graders stay with, so to speak, eighth graders. But yeah, I think there would be a lot of advantages to that, other than the fact that we would have to pass a huge referendum and then sell a building where we would not get back what we spent on the huge referendum.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think possibly to the last part, in terms of what we would have to sell or not sell. I think that's all TBD, right?
Well, if we moved all of the high school students 9 through 12 in one of the high schools, then we'd either have an empty high school that we have to sell, or we'd have to move our middle school students into that high school, and then we'd have a middle school to sell.
Or two.
Or two. Well, there you go. Maybe you could sell 2 middle schools, and then you could.
Make it a 2 for sale?
Yeah.
Well, we already had interest in one, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, I use John Muir as an example because that is a location that is good not just for a school. That would be a very popular location, but I don't think we would get enough to, there's your charge. Find a buyer for John Muir equal to the cost of what it would be to make a one high school, and then we don't even have to go to a referendum.
Right.
We
there
can
you
make
go.
the taxpayers very happy.
We sell John Muir for $100 million.
I just think that given the magnitude of this, regardless of what option is selected or not selected, if we're serious about doing this, it appears we are. 9 through 12 on one campus, I think, needs to be explored, and the details behind that, the financial details behind that, need to be explored, along with all of the different operational, I think, I don't want to get into all of them, but think about busing. If all of a sudden you have one campus for high school, there's a lot of stuff that falls off the table that we have to do. So when I think of closing a building or not utilizing a building, that it can hurt us in the short term, but long term, there's a ton of savings that we can get from that.
Okay, so some things that we'd want to know about the East Campus. Is there, I think I know a couple answers, but are there going to be some environmental restrictions on whether it's an addition to the building, addition to parking lots, because of the condition of the soil and how we have those drainage areas set up? To me, because of the way the traffic pattern is at that school and one path around, the parking for the athletic facilities in the back are crazy. So that would definitely need to be addressed. And if that means we just can move a bunch of rock and knock down more trees to make a parking lot, okay. Does that building have any capability of having a second level on any parts of its structure? Building up is cheaper than going out if it's ready to do so. If we're gonna, I don't mind looking at everything,
Well,
because that's our
said
job, right?
it sounds awesome, but we just can't afford it. But Pat, he's got pipe dreams over here, so he's making me think maybe we should maybe we should look into
I'm
it.
just
It just
saying
seems
this is a huge impact
unobtainable,
on the
but-
community, right? This is a huge impact on parents, students, staff. We, beat that one to death. So if we're going to do this, why not explore what that utopia might look like and what it might cost?
Does anyone think that we should keep in the 9, 10, 11, 12, 2 campuses option? Because I don't. I think
I don't
that,
either.
I think that the advantages of 8, 9, 10, 12 are so much better that that one could be pulled out. Is that a lot of head nods on that one?
Yes.
How about the first 2 enrollment?
I don't
Oh,
think
sorry.
that going through the whole boundary issue is just a temporary fix. To me, we would have it'll be a huge community emotional situation, and it would only be a temporary fix. I don't feel very good about 2 equal high schools or moving the boundaries at all.
I agree. A lot of head nods again on those.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I agree.
Johnson.
So we're interested in 8, 9, 10, 12, or a single 9, 12 high school.
If we were to make East our single high school, would we possibly be able to sell West? Or is it
I have no idea what you do with that thing.
because more people are moving to
Yeah.
the west side, that could possibly be a development, a housing development, or houses.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to talk to a realtor. Right. All right. Let us do a little background work on those. And we'll see if we can bring anything that gets us any more direction. Bob, thoughts on this? You've been involved in this.
Sure, the real estate is probably more valuable than the buildings in many of these cases, right? Like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Mir. The property at Mir is valuable. How valuable? Not as valuable as a building.
No.
Property, obviously, but that's what the market would fetch. I think it'd be a stretch if you're gonna sell that real estate for $8 million.
Right.
Right? You can't build a high school for that. West High School, the development with homes, I don't know if that would fetch a lot of money either because that's residential, right?
Correct.
I haven't spent that much time thinking about these scenarios. Other than Mir.
Yeah, I was joking when I said sell one of those high schools and make it be enough to build, or sell one of those schools and make it be enough to.
Sure.
I knew that's not possible. You couldn't do that.
No.
You could take the sting out of it, let's put it that way, by selling some real estate. I don't know.
My question to the other board members is, part of the reason to look at consolidating elementary schools is reduce the operational costs because we haven't had a increase in per pupil funding from the state, and we have ESSER money, right? And that stuff's going to go away, and we've already brought up that that's going to create issues in the next few years. And so by changing the structure and finding efficiencies really across the board, which Bob and his team, I would assume, already continually do to try to fix that, is that really the biggest, right? And is that the biggest issue, but how is that hinged to the student experience?
I think when you say biggest issue, it depends on who you ask, because what I don't think we should say is that the only reason we're looking at consolidation is financial. It's a reason.
It is,
but
right,
but it's not the only reason. We're looking at
how are they tied together?
Advantages we can create, even putting the money aside in right-sizing schools. You know, some of the opportunities that we can create and the better services that we can provide. And I guess in a roundabout way, you get back to money eventually. The efficiencies allow you to create better services, but you know, it's more fun to talk about it as what things will improve with those changes, as opposed to, we got to do it because our enrollment's down and our funding's down, which is true, but it's not the only reason.
Absolutely not.
I have just, as we're talking about this, we also talked about some curriculum things and those sorts of things in the past. And I thought, for example, the charter school might be a really brilliant idea. And we've talked about academies, some of those sorts of things, and I'm not sure how those fit into the pictures that we cannot presented right now.
We aren't either. Those are just some concepts that we've talked about. Again, at this point, we're still really high level here, right? Even the measurable outcomes are in the ballpark. We're just not sure what seat we're in yet, or even we might even be on the field. We don't know. But we don't know what that might look like. But it was actually it was Bob's genius idea, and we were talking about capacity of the schools. And he's like, well, what if we keep the auto students over there? And then we started talking about it. It's got some merit. So,
Keith, the other item that I think we should make note of, and I know that there's been feedback in a lot of the different venues, is, and you mentioned it a few weeks ago when I said, there are experiences today that people really like.
Mm-hmm.
So and you called it, we don't want to do any harm. We need a list of what do we not want to harm.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to create that. Because I guess we could certainly ask, right? Hey, what's really valuable to you right now? I wonder at what level. So if we have, if we ask, say, 8,000 kids or whatever number of parents, and we get, how many different, a long laundry list of these are all the things that are important to me. If it's 1,000 people, that says something. What if it's one, right? Where do we draw a line? And maybe there's a natural delineation. We could certainly ask the question. I'm not sure exactly what the question would be. To your point earlier, we'd have to ask the right question. But
Well, but that's kind of a foundational piece of information when we're talking about improving experience. You have to know what you're improving from. Because I'm sure there's things that the staff really enjoy about wherever they're at today. And I'm sure there's things that they would like changed. But what are those concepts, items, structure, people, facility things that they like? What is keeping them here? Same for parents, same for students. Why haven't you gone somewhere else? Oh, well, I really like these 3 things.
So we've sort of narrowed this list down, at least. You're getting direction from the board that we're not really interested at this time in enrollment boundaries moving or creating 2 equal high schools or the 9, 10, 11, 12. Do you feel like you have enough tonight accomplished to move on to the next meeting?
This is a good
Okay.
first step. Our next meeting, of course, is just a few days from now, so I don't think I'll have an estimate for a new high school, but we'll see what we can put together to keep the conversation moving. So thank you.
Okay, so let's move on then to new business. And we're going to discuss substitute pay rates. Tabitha is coming up.
Good evening. We have talked in the past about substitute rates, and I'm back. Because when we approved the rates that we moved to at the start of the school year, it was based on survey data that I had recently gathered not long before we had that conversation. I recently became aware that subsequent to that conversation and approval, several districts in our region increased their substitute pay rates. When we spoke last, we were essentially like the second highest paying district for our daily sub rate. We are now the second to the lowest paying district for our daily sub rate. And as such, we are seeing some impact in terms of our substitute availability and willingness to work in our district when they can go to a neighboring district and make a number of dollars more per hour. As such, to try to help with our unfilled positions from a substitute standpoint and get more people back into our district as a district of choice for that opportunity, I am asking for the daily rate to be adjusted to $140 per day. And I am also asking for approval to add $25 per day as an add-on stipend for those substitutes that accept our float sub positions. For those of you who may not know, a float sub is a position that we have that guarantees that they'll be available to work every day for us. They get their assignment for which building they're going to go to the morning of. They get contacted by Jennifer Holcomb in the Human Resources Office, and they find out what assignment they've been given, and they go willingly to do just about anything that we send them to do. So it is definitely a very flexible position, and we depend on the flexibility of those filling that role. So that's essentially the ask that I have for you tonight, and I'm hoping for approval so that we could make this change right after the start of the new year. We would begin the pay rate change as of the first payroll cycle after January 1st, which is, I believe, Thursday, January 5th, would be the first day that the new rates would be able to go into effect.
Questions from board members?
Where are we today?
We're at $130 per day.
And where is our competition?
DC Everest is at 136. Stevens Point is at 140. They have some that are at 130, but 140 is like retirees and those that have experience with the district, which is a good portion of our substitute population. We have one district that's paying 125. There's one other district paying 130 like us, and everybody else is in that mid 130s. And there are 3 districts in the data that I had that were paying 140 per day. So.
And just so everybody understands, the implications of not filling those substitute positions on a daily basis is a direct impact to the students of that class that is then vacant. And I know that all kinds of wonderful things happen to cover,
For
but
sure.
it's a challenge, it's a struggle. I've heard the stories.
Yeah, and I would say that direct impact, the most direct impact is on the students, obviously.
Right.
Not far behind that is the impact that's left on the staff members that are scrambling in the buildings to make those bridge assignments happen. We won't eliminate the need to do that with an increase to our rates, but I do think when Jen is contacting subs and hears, well, if I get an opportunity to go to this neighboring district, I'm gonna go there over here because I'm making $5, $10 more per day. Over the course of 175 or 180 days in a year, $5 or $10 a day adds up. So, and our rates, quite frankly, they probably needed to go up, and I look at how far they've come all across the state over the past 5 or 6 years. They've risen significantly, probably appropriately so, given the task that substitute teachers have every day when they come to work.
Everest is 136, you said?
They are.
I would recommend 145.
I agree.
It's me.
It's exactly what I was thinking, because I won't want to be doing this again. I want to give you some.
We'll be doing it again, it's just how often.
Well,
we'll be doing
that
it
was
again.
the next question of how long you thought maybe it would last, but
I think in the end, my recommendation to match the highest pay rate in this region was related to budget. Because right now, we're getting by because we have a lot of unfilled positions. That said, as you know, and as we talked about, it's taking a toll in lots of ways. There's a part of me that says we can't afford to continue to increase it, and there's a bigger part of me that says we can't afford not to. And so that's the dilemma that I think we are facing. If you all want to go to 145, I'm certainly not going to say no. It will have a bigger impact on our budget than the 140 change.
The one question I would have for that is, if we go to 140, we're quote-unquote tied for the highest. If we go to 145, does that cause 4 other schools to go to 145 as well, so we're still just tied for the highest? We're in the same position, 3 months from now, we're in the same position.
That is oftentimes what happens. Because similar conversations in other districts are going to happen like I'm having with you now, so.
Is there, or are there certain positions that are so much harder to fill than others that it would be worth it to explore a varying rate, or is it pretty consistent?
I would say special education is the position that almost always is unfilled, more so than any of the others. So
And I wouldn't ask you to propose that now unless you're ready for it now, but I'm wondering if there are certain positions that are so much harder to fill, and it's kind of always that way, that maybe some positions should be paid more than others.
If you're asking me that right now anecdotally, I would say special education because it is the position that is most unfilled out of all of our positions that we need substitutes for.
And where my brain is going is, we're talking about making sure that there are qualified people in front of our students on a daily basis. The mission is to advance student learning, achievement, and success. If we get into a budget issue, I would much rather have that brought to us and say, look, we have to think about cutting A, B, or C, instead of, I don't want to say skimping, but running the risk of not having people in front of our kids. That's why we're here. So if we got to cut somewhere else, I would much rather have that conversation than say, oh, well, we're just going to limp along, and if we don't have subs on any given day, we don't. And I know that that's not what's happening.
Right.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I don't object to 145 instead of 140. My only question is, does it accomplish anything? Because it doesn't accomplish anything if 4 other districts just say, okay, well, we're going to go to 145 too. So then we're in the exact same position if we stay 140 and they stay 140.
I'm confused. We're already talking about a 165 for the float. where does that fit into this whole equation? Because we're talking about special ed maybe being at a different rate and whatever. So just, can you give us a picture of that?
So the proposal that I brought to you were two rates. 140 for our daily rate subs. So anybody who comes in to sub in any position for a one-day agreement would get $140 a day. Instead of currently, they get $130. Okay, so it's $10 a day increase. The $25 add-on stipend per day is only for our float subs, which right now we have 4 at our secondary buildings, and I believe there's only 3 filled right now at our elementary buildings. We were originally authorizing 6 at the start of the school year, and we did not have 3 additional people that were interested in the requirement, essentially, for them to go anywhere and do any role based on our discretion in the morning. That's a big ask for a lot of people. So the $25 additional per day just for that small number of people that are being utmost flexible with us is what we're asking for as a separate, like, secondary request.
And I don't think, I wouldn't make a motion tonight to have a different rate for different positions like special ed, because I don't think we should just do that off the cuff, but I would encourage you to look into that and maybe bring it back if you think there's some value there, because if there are certain positions that are really hard to fill, maybe we shouldn't treat all the positions the same.
I can certainly do some more analysis on that detail.
Any other, this is a action item tonight. It sounds like we have support for increasing the rate. It's more of a question of what to increase it to. Are there any other board comments on that, or Dr. Hiltz?
Just a quick question. As long as you were asking for a little analysis, Tabitha, what do you think about, we've got another meeting in a week.
Yep, we could do it then.
Do you want to bring this back in a week?
For sure.
And maybe we can do a little bit of that analysis you're talking about?
Just to do it all at once?
Do we do it
you
all
mean?
at once?
Okay, I mean, you tell me whether that timing matters.
That timing will be just fine for the same implementation that we're talking about.
Anybody else have a problem with that?
No, I don't have an issue with that to do it all in one shot. My question would be more procedural. We're operations next week, is that not correct? So we'd need a special meeting afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the reason why we had pushed it onto this agenda, because we've been having these active conversations, so, but I don't think that would be a difficult process.
Okay.
I would be curious to know what the top 3 are, besides special ed, what the 2 other ones are.
Sure.
That are hard
Yep.
to fill.
I will pull that information out of our reporting.
Okay. We don't have a motion on the table, so we can just hold off on this one then until the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We have a guest who's been sitting.
We should have moved you up earlier.
Yeah, I just thought about
First,
that.
thank you for allowing me to be
Yeah.
here. And I'm glad I only have to worry about a checkbook now I'm retired. My internal auditor's my wife.
Okay, good evening, board members. Like Dr. Hiltz mentioned, we do have a special guest with us. His name is Mark Lambert, and the reason that he is here today is we have the support of our community, and it's wonderful. They give donations all the time, and I had the opportunity to meet Mark a few weeks ago, who came across a very interesting find at an estate sale and wanted to make sure that we got this donation. So I'm going to let him take the mic and walk us through what he found and why he gave it to us.
Thank you, Diana. Again, my name's Mark Lambert, and I came upon this estate sale, and it was of George E. Lane. And a lot of people don't know who George E. Lane is. Well, I came to do a little research during my time after I talked to her. He's a line artist, but that wasn't what his hobby was. His family was first, and I tend to believe the school district was second to him. And if Diana would kind of show these to you, he did a whole bunch of drawings of prints of every Wausau school in the district. And this was his hobby. I mean, he did this as a hobby. To me, he's a renowned artist of Wausau. I mean, he did the Yawkey House, he did the Grand Theater, and he actually had unlimited prints. And I went into this estate sale, and I'm like, you know what? It's a Sunday. Estate sales usually have nothing, and I saw this drawing board. I'm like, I'm looking at this drawing board, and, you know, to make it short, I like to talk, is that I saw these prints. And the first one I saw was Thomas Jefferson. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. I said, that's where my son went, you know? So it brought back memories to me.
Yeah.
And then I kept on going, and it showed the whole school district, you know? Grant, John Muir, which I don't think you ought to get rid of. But that's my opinion. What's in my wallet?
Yeah.
So, you know, line artists have gone for forever. And a lot of people don't know what line artists are. But you've heard the names. Michelangelo. Van Gogh, his sketches were pencil sketches, you know, and it goes on and on and on. Goya. And if you ever heard of Charles Peterson, has anybody ever heard of Charles Peterson? Well-renowned artist of the late arrival at Wausau Depot. You see the Wausau Depot and the train pulling in, and there's hidden images in it. He's called the ghost artist. His was line sketches, and I've kind of into artistry because I collect prints. And I saw this print here was an artist proof. You know what the artist proof means? It's the very first print he ever did. And it's his hand-drawn one, which he has. And you guys didn't have that. But I came up here and I said, oh, you do have it. You have number 1 outside this door, but it's as high as the ceiling so nobody can see it. So I would say change that if you would for me anyway.
Yeah.
Okay? So just to tell you a little bit about what it does, it's about horizontal lines, vertical lines, and curved lines. And if you look at this, that's what it is. And most artists, even the famous ones, they weren't George E. Lane. But you know what? In my opinion, George E. Lane is a famous person. Because in his drawings, he created Wausau. And you said it right there in your video. The heart of Wausau is what? It's the schools. And you know what? You look at this picture. What did he put in the center of it is the administration, and what's around it is the schools.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's why I grabbed this. I didn't have to grab it. I knew where it was going if I didn't grab it, though. I didn't want to see it get recycled. So, you know, there's a couple other things. And one other person who used lines and being a person who builds, Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah.
Okay? He created his works of art by using line artistry. So in closing, what I'd like to say is, you know, I would like you to remember George E. Lane, because you know what? To me, he's famous for Wausau. He created Wausau in pictures. It was important to him and a passion. You folks today up here made me feel like a bad parent. I never came to one of your meetings, but today I learned a lot. I wanted to speak out a lot. I kept my mouth shut. But you know what? It's through you folks that create great schools, along with our faculty, our substitutes, our teachers, our administrators, and we can't also, you know what? You need the help of parents, okay? And today, you know, in closing, I see that. And the last thing I like to say is, you know, I like to give 2 shout-outs to Diane Eder and Rhonda Hallam. They made my child, Jacob Lambert, a success story. And, you know, he wants to be a psychiatrist for the military.
Wow.
And I think he's going to get there.
Yeah.
And it all started at Wausau West School District Schools.
Excellent.
And Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much.
And we are excited to get these on display in our schools, and we're gracious to you, Mark, for this wonderful donation.
I appreciate it. And you know what? I hope you enjoy them. You know what? Keep doing the good work.
Yeah.
I'll keep checking on you now. I know you're on.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying.
Thank you very much.
Nikki, can you join us up here? Thank you. Yes, sir.
school. It's a great spot. Yeah, main
All right. Thank you. Tonight, we're gonna, have a, thank you. Tonight, we're gonna have a referendum budget and construction update, and this is gonna be pretty routine. We're gonna have these almost monthly. We're gonna shoot for monthly if there's not a lot of excitement in some of the construction projects. We might skip one from time to time. So this is a pretty routine report that you're gonna see every month, with one exception. There was a request probably about a month ago regarding the school forest and how the school forest, the original budget evolved to the point where we had a design budget that was a little bit larger, and then when we bid it out, it even got larger yet. So we're gonna have one slide where we're gonna be able to talk about that and address some questions. If you advance to the next slide, this is the one we're talking about. We verbalized some of this about a month ago. We talked about one of the big reasons for the increased cost at the school forest was the basement. And Larry maybe came up with a couple other ones that night, but here we've got a full list of what caused that budget to get as large as it has. If we look at the upper left, that's the original concept, square footage, and the budget that we presented during the referendum. And when we start with that, to a certain degree, this happens in all of our projects, and we have more specifics here, but we tasked Nexus to stay within that scope and stay within that budget and help us design something that would meet that $4.243 million budget. So at design, that's what it would be. So in the purple right below that, you see an arrow going down. Those were some of the measures that we took with our design team and Nexus's help and Somerville's help to keep that cost at $4.243 million. We reduced the square footage. We reduced the building volumes, not just the square footage, but also the height of some of the rooms. We reduced the amount of glass. We changed from the glue laminated wood beams from the custom wood beams. And at that point, we had what would be a design budget about the same as the referendum budget. But also, again, this is a representation of the school forest to a certain degree. This happens in all of our projects. Then we start talking about what else we would like in that building to stay consistent with what we promoted during the referendum and also end up with a fully functioning building like the students deserve. So all of those items on the right were a result of either getting farther along in the design to reveal some things that would be a little bit more costly. Keep in mind, when we do the referendum budget, we don't have the time, we don't have the energy, we don't want to commit the cost to a full design, because you don't know if the referendum is going to pass at that point or fail. And then once it passes, then you get a little bit further down the design road, and some things are revealed, like the need for a septic field that was a little bit more expensive. And some things through the design team and the end users and many, many meetings, we add to the project. The basement was an example of that. And those top two represent a large percentage, over 490,000 of the 800,000. Sharon's here with me. I guess I could have introduced you, but they know both of you by now. Sharon Gould, Nick Anderson from Nexus. And any of those items that are listed, that total 800,000, which ended up being the design overage, they can more specifically address. Larry Seiler is also here. Chris Nelson might be back there somewhere. He can also talk about some of the design team meetings that led to some of these additions. So with that, I think I'm going to pause on this slide because the rest of the slide deck's quite a bit different than this one with the other routine updates.
Questions from board members?
I think I was the one that asked for this, Bob, and it was sold at that time that the increase was due to end user requests. But when I look at this, I don't see a relocation of a septic field is something that Chris or his friends would have come up with, or utility relocations, or a new generator, or asphalt replacement allowance. Those, to me, seem like big ticket items that should have been obvious in the 4.2 million. What am I missing there?
Not necessarily the end users, but the design process that the end users were included in. So you're right. Utility relocation and relocation of septic field, the end user might not feel that strongly about that, but it was an element of the design team meetings that included the end users. So that would be an example, the relocation of septic. If we didn't have to do that, I think Chris Nelson would have been great with that.
How did we
During the
not, so
design
in that example though, how did we not get that in the 4.2 million? That's what I'm really questioning
Talked
about any,
that earlier.
about any of these.
Yeah, so I just want to address the septic fields. So when design gets started, we come in when the referendum is developed. It's at I always like to say it's at the 10,000 foot view. And so when design started, we're starting to incur money for design to dig in and find out those details and whittle it down into the final design. So with the septic field, what specifically happened there is when we did the site survey, which is step one of every single design project that we do, what they do is identify the what's on the site, utility locations, the septic field locations, and things like that. So once we take that, we work with, we're paying a civil engineer, we're paying for the surveyors to go forward. Once we understand that more technical, more specific information, what happens next is we actually site the building. We locate the building where it has the best impact, and part of the septic field was within the floodplains of the Wisconsin River that's up there. So we started to have to react to what information was coming back from the data testing that we're collecting to be able to site the building properly. So with that being said, we were not allowed to modify the septic field based on DNR rules and things like that. So we had to make some, essentially hard decisions on where to locate the building within the existing field. So there's a domino effect that comes off of that. So we corrected what we were required to correct. So that the whole site works together. So it was a fairly complicated site. And when we're in design, we learn all those details. But up front, during the development, we could have paid for the surveys to get all that information. But it's like there's a lot of costs that goes for it, to have. I think that survey was about $7,500 to identify that information. And to do that for every site that we're in throughout the district does add up before the referendum would pass. So it's kind of a balance between the referendum steps moving forward, the risk, the money that's being put forth for a referendum that might or might not pass, versus once you have that stability there, the risk is lower to be able to spend that money to get that additional detail that we need to move forward.
Is Nexus responsible for any of the overage, or does that all fall on the district?
Well, that's, I guess as far as, I'm just still focusing on the septic field itself, but that's part of the project costs. So as far as it is the project cost that we're presenting here. I think it's the project cost, but it's part of
The project cost is a little bit higher than the 504. You'll see it on the last slide because once we bid it, it got higher than that. It stayed within the 10%. But one thing we need to keep in mind, Nexus presented a number quite a while back of $4.243 million for the school forest. And Nexus worked hard to bring us an initial design that would hit that budget by doing the things in purple. And then, just like every other project, and there's give and there's take, and there are things that we want in the building, and there are things that we must have in the building. The septic field is an example of that. And we bring it to 50%, and we talk about it and what has changed since the original budget. You're gonna get a chance to see that with Mir tonight and see it again with the athletic phase one tonight. And we talk about what we like about the plan, how it's evolving. And then we bring the 95%, and we talk again about what we like or don't like about the plan, and then we send it out to bid. And at that point, Nexus has really done their job working with us to develop a 95% plan that, in this case, we knew was going to be a little bit more expensive,
Bob?
by $800,000.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but to Pat's question, what I heard you saying, Sharon, was the reason that we had to make those changes to the septic field, because once we did the survey and the perk tests, then the DNR comes in and says, now you gotta move that, correct? So that's something you wouldn't have known before the survey and the perk tests were done, am I right?
Not likely, no.
So I think that's the main driver behind that.
Yeah, and that's essentially my question. I mean, because we didn't get a design for 4.2 million, we got a design for 3.4 million is what it should have been. With this additional 800,000 would have taken us to 4.2. But we already started at the budget. We didn't take into account potential issues like this, so now we're at 19% over original.
But Pat, if you look, so the basement, we originally were going to use the Bannerman basement for inclement weather. In more recent conversations during the design phase, we determined that it may not be adequate, so that was our call. The patio, the amphitheater, the radiant heating, those are all from users. Those are things we thought we should add that we weren't originally having in the plan because of the quality of the experience we want the kids to have. So that was on us.
And maybe to address the generator is large or larger than what was out there to handle a lot more of the load. So if there's like a snowstorm in the middle of the winter that takes out power, the generator is big enough to handle a much larger portion of that building to be a safe space during a snowstorm. So that was just like a great I'm not saying it's a great safety, it's just important to make sure that those kids are safe out there. So there's a lot of safety items that we're listening to and incorporating to make sure that, safety is a critical piece of a successul building on the site.
No, I agree, and to me, the safety things, that's, I guess, where my disappointment, for lack of a better word, comes in. I'm a little surprised that the safety things weren't caught in the initial design, and that those are being added on top of. And we don't have to continue to beat it to death. We'll leave it at that, but I hope that doesn't continue as we get into the next phases of buildings.
So I want to address that a little bit as well, is these are a portfolio of projects. And in the end, there's give and take on a lot of these different buildings. And I have a specific client I just finished working with in a different district. And he was quoting that there's a lot of, these first couple of projects until you get the feel and the rhythm going, but we still have a lot of future projects that are coming in that are large. So when you look at this total budget, it factors into the total budget of the total contract. And so we'll get into it later when we go into John Muir a little bit on, that purple box shows the efforts that we make up front. And we do have the opportunity, and we'll present that at John Muir on areas that we're taking to help make sure that, everything, that portfolio comes into the positive. And if we're able to do that as a team, and I don't want to offer this up too soon, but there might be opportunities at the end of the project to reinvest that back into the school district to help come up with, other needs that need to be addressed. And we are pretty good at doing that as well. And I have, other references that I can share with how that works, if you're interested.
No, it goes back to the conversation we had last time. I think Jim or John mentioned it, that if you start out 19% over on one, is it going to be a snowball effect down the road?
We hope not, we know not, for a couple of reasons, including your suggestion, I believe it was yours from a month ago, that at 95%, we're going to get a little bit better chance to offer you a chance to approve not only the 95% design, but the 95% budget that goes along with it, where we'll be able to catch some of those things before we even take them to bid. If we need to go back and redesign some things, that's the time to do it instead of after bid. And so we've got some procedures in place, and on the way to 120 million, we are still pretty early in this process, so we do have a couple of big projects where we can take advantage of that procedure. So it's a good change. We're going to make that change every time you see 95%, you're going to see a number that comes along with it.
Yeah, I think
Thank you.
That was one of my concerns as well, is because, we've got Riverview South and Stettin came in right on budget, Riverview and School Forest over budget. And it's nothing to panic. It's covered by the interest. We still even have more interest after that. But my worry is that if 2 of our first 4 are over budget, then are we gonna have to go way under budget for our later projects? Because we only have a certain amount we can spend. So we have this amount we were authorized by the taxpayers, and that's all we can spend. So that would be my worry, is I wouldn't want to get to a point where we're having to sort of unfairly, I'll say, cut later projects just because they happen to be in year 2 instead of year 1.
Lance, I mean, I appreciate your comments, and I've been involved in quite a few of these projects throughout my career. And I kind of compare it to talking to your financial advisor of, you know, put your money in there and let it grow. Don't watch it too close. Now, I understand this is everybody else's money. But generally, as Sharon was alluding to, there is some up and down as we go through this, and it gets a little scary right in the beginning. But we have confidence that we're gonna be able to come back right where we.
So you think we're gonna see a down?
What's that?
Do you think we'll see a down? You think we'll see one that actually, with the interest rates and everything the way they are, inflation, I thought it'd be real hard to see one that actually comes in under budget.
Well, some of the larger projects give us some opportunities we wouldn't have with these smaller projects. And also some of the expansion projects and the remodel projects, we have opportunities we don't have in the new building also. So we're hoping to see some downs.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll watch it. We'll watch it real closely. We won't totally ignore it like a financial advisor might say, but we're gonna watch it. Every month, we're gonna look at it. Next slide. So now we start talking about some of the excitement that's happening in some of our active sites. So I'm gonna really turn this one over to Nick more than anything, and Sharon's gonna go through the deck.
All right, well, and I think last time we got together for a construction update, we just had gotten done putting up the construction fence out at Statine, and that's as far as we had gone. So I want to say that was about 6 weeks ago. A lot has happened since then. In essence, the time I'll go pretty quick through these items. If you have anything that you would like me to expand on, please feel free. So starting off with Statine Elementary, the existing vestibule has been removed. Temporary construction enclosures, site fencing has all been placed. If anybody's driven by there, it's obviously a construction site at this time. Footing and foundation excavation has been complete. The playground and basketball court has been prepared and ready for pavement, so that will likely be paved in June of next year. The bearing footings and foundation walls have been placed. Underground plumbing has been installed. The backfilling of the footings and the foundation is complete. Interior slab rough grading has been complete, so basically if you go out there, it doesn't look a whole lot different than it will when it have concrete inside the building. And the above ground masonry started last week as well, so we've got MEP up there, which stands for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing rough-ins taking place. So that's where we are sitting right now, and if you want to go to the next slide, there's some photos of that progress that has taken place. The most recent photo on here would be early last week, so there's actually been progress since here, and walls are coming up above the ground as we speak. Hollow metal door frames are going to start getting installed as they continue with their masonry work, and bar joists and roof deck are to be installed. As of right now, that's scheduled to come in the later part of January, so kind of depending on when we meet next, that'll either be installed or very close to be installed. Moving on to South Mountain Elementary School, the vestibules have been removed on both of the additions. Temporary construction, egress, enclosures, and site fencing has been placed. Footing and foundation excavation is ongoing. Site utilities have been relocated. There was a fire hydrant on the property that needed to be moved before we could start digging for one of the additions. So that took place after hours, shut down water to the entire school. So we had to make sure that took place after school hours so it didn't disrupt the building. And bearing footings and foundation walls are being installed currently, and they're making great progress out there. It's probably eventually going to catch up to Statine. And if you want to go to the next slide, they can see some pictures of the progress there. It's obviously a construction site. You can kind of see where that plywood is on the door. That is where one of your vestibules did exist. You can see in the bottom of the picture that's brand new fresh concrete, hasn't even been troweled yet there, so you can see a lot was going on. They were continuing to pour the footings right up against the building when that picture was taken. So coming up next on there, underground plumbing will be taking place. The backfill of the footings and foundation, which is already ongoing starting today. Interior slab roughing, rough grading, will be completed, so it's a nice flat working surface in there. Above ground masonry, MEP roughing will start taking place. Ceiling removal in the existing building will take place, so over winter break, some of the mechanical, plumbing, and electrical tie-ins need to happen. So what we're gonna do is remove the acoustic ceilings in the corridors, and in doing so, we'll be suspending all light fixtures and HVAC, fire alarm, etc. through there. So we're gonna take care of that over winter break, and then that'll allow contractors to continue to work on that throughout the year while the additions are being built at the same time. And go to the next one, which I believe is Riverview. Riverview Elementary, the temporary construction, egress enclosures, and site fencing is placed. I guess one thing I didn't elaborate on too much out at South Mountain, we do always meet with the building code official and the fire marshals for the area. And there were 2 temporary egresses that needed to be put into the building. One of them, so basically we remove a portion of the wall. We put in a door with a panic hardware and panic door, because by removing those vestibules, we took away a path of egress. So I don't know if there's a good picture of that. No, you can't see that. And those I can certainly bring a picture next time. One of them comes through a classroom, one of them came through a storage closet. So each wing has a door. If you drive by and wonder what that is, it's gonna be put back together at the end of the project, just so you know. So that's when I was, in Riverview Elementary, fortunately, we did not have to cut in a temporary door, but the existing vestibule has been blocked off. There really wasn't a vestibule to remove in this case. We're building right up to where the door opening was, but it's been blocked off. We've got the site fencing in place. Putting in foundation excavation has been complete. If you guys folks remember, that was a smaller excavation. So rather than digging out the trenches like you saw in some of those other pictures, they actually remove. You can go to the picture here. I can go off of my slides here. You can see that wide open. Basically looks like they're digging a basement there, but they take all the earth out of that area. So that's been done. Footings and foundations are actually being installed. Some got done last week. There's more taking place this week, and they'll end up building, the foundation walls and replacing the soils in. So once again, they have a flat working surface to build their masonry walls off of, where the MEP rough-ins will be taking place. And then there was some exterior sidewalk work that needed to happen. It was over Thanksgiving break, I believe, that the sanitary and the stormwater lines were ran. So in doing so, some of the exterior sidewalks had to be removed. They have all been replaced now at this point. So if the school chooses, they can use that area again. They kind of have stayed away from that there as far as children traffic, but it's not necessary. So kind of more of the same will be happening there in the next few weeks. Same scenario with the ceilings, where we'll be taking down a portion of the ceiling tiles through the corridor to allow the mechanical and electrical plumbing tie-ins to continue to take place while the addition is being built. And then we can go on to the School Forest Environmental Learning Center update. So for those of you that were able to come out there last week, you likely noticed that the existing lodge has been demolished and removed. Site utilities have been relocated. The fiber line needed to be relocated, and then there was a main electrical feed that needed to be relocated. On Monday of last week, they had not finished the electrical relocation. As of last week, that is now done. Temporary construction site fencing is placed. Once again, if you made it out there last week, you could definitely tell where the construction is going to be happening. And then frost protection has been placed. They chose to use hay and straw out there. You probably saw from some of the other pictures they're using concrete blankets. We're building through winter conditions is what we call it, and it does take a few extra steps, which includes things like covering the ground and making sure we're not building on top of frozen soils. And then the groundbreaking ceremony was held, and I think we've got a couple pictures we can share there. So the intent is to start excavating for the new building over winter break. And from there, it'll be similar steps you're seeing, where we'll have excavations, footing, foundations. One of the differences of the school forest is there's not structural masonry as there is in the other classroom additions that we're currently doing. So it will look a little bit different as it's going up. Kind of the recipe is the same, where we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. So we'll continue to provide updates. If anybody has specific constructions questions, feel free to reach out to me. We had the groundbreaking that we touched on, and then just checked in on the sites. We had, I think, 28 field employees working today, and I would imagine those numbers will hold true for another couple of weeks. And then with the excavation taking place out at the school forest, that number is just going to grow and get bigger, probably all the way until next fall.
So we'll pause there if you have any questions on the construction update before I take that last slide.
Bob, can I make one really cool note? At the groundbreaking, we had every one of the previous school forest directors, including the person who started it back in 1956.
I think.
Right? So we had all four of the previous directors. They all had long tenures. It was a great event. So.
And that's the picture on the right there.
Yep. Jerry Maney in his buffalo plaid and the fella next to him.
Any questions from Nick on the construction update? This slide you've seen before. So the gray numbers will be original budgets, and if nothing has been done with a new design budget, they'll stay gray. And if they haven't been bid out, they'll also stay gray or green in some cases. The light green is a change that we made to West High School. The original budget was increased by $500,000. It's not the other color green because it's not quite the design budget yet. We just knew it was going to add about $500,000 at West to prepare that southwest corner for a third, or second for sure, third floor, if we ever had to add on. Other than that, you're going to see this develop. More stuff will become green. That'll be the design budget, and then we'll fill in the dates that we bid it out, and then more will become the gold color, I guess. The bottom right corner, we probably will keep some attention on. We're under budget right now by about $2 million if we include the $4.2 million in projected interest earnings. So we are staying within budget at this point. This will probably get taller because some of these will be broken up into several bid packages. I can think, for example, East High School. Later on tonight, we're talking about athletic phase 1. There's nothing athletic up there. East will be broken up into East Athletics and other. West will be broken up into West Athletics and other, but all the numbers will still reconcile. Questions on this report? That's the last of this agenda item. We want to share with you the 50% design at Mir and also the athletics. Move on?
Okay, yep, you can move on.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. How about if I call Dr. Galligan up here? We're doing Mir. That one's next on the agenda at least, so. So this is the 50% design update for Mir. We'll do another later on, and we want to talk a little bit about the meetings that we've held, the input we've had from different people, some of the cost controls that we've gone through to keep the scope and the budget within our original budget. So with that, how about if I turn it over to you, Sharon, or Patrick?
I'll start.
All right.
Well, hello again. So we'll just start going through the 50% design review and give you some highlights on what's changed and where we are to date. So with that, like all of these meetings, I just want to show you the original referendum design concept. There's a couple things that I want to just point out here, as we do have 6 additions that are shown on this original concept. And so that was one of the options that we had to look forward to as we went through. And I'll get into more detail with the additions and how the scope changes throughout. And Patrick will be able to assist to provide some feedback on why we made some of these changes and how it worked to focus on the school curriculum first and making sure that it fits within our budget. So with that, We've had 13 design meetings to date. We have one on Thursday, which would make it number 14. It's a district leadership team, the building team, that have been contributing to all the major design decisions. The other half of that, this is really where we got into the user group meetings. So we had all the principals, we had maintenance teachers, and some of the specialty groups that we focused on was special education, physical, phy-ed, or athletics, science, theater, music, the front office staff, the student services staff, and other miscellaneous people. So I guess, Patrick, do you have any comments regarding how that went for you?
A lot of meetings, a lot of talk, but a lot of good input from all those different groups was really valuable in some of the changes that you'll see. I believe that some of the design changes that we made make a lot of sense, and it makes for a much better project as a result of those meetings.
So here I just want to walk you all around the site to see what's changed. So you can see here on this drawing, this is the current design. You see the orange are the new additions. You're not seeing the inside of the building because we just have the roof there, but you can see other site activities as we go through this. We did focus on the student pickup and drop-off, bus and car. We did focus the site work to react to the additions that are showing up on site. And there's other site maintenance like asphalt work, track work, things like that, that we did incorporate into the project. So I'm just going to take you around the building in a little bit more detail. There's just so much going on here that, these drawings might be a little bit small, but I just wanted to point out we are maintaining the track. We haven't worked out all the details yet on that, but the asphalt, the finishes will be new. We did provide, what's interesting here is with the new bus pickup and drop off on the western side of the building, we were able to connect into 17th Street. And based on what the design team was giving us feedback for, is we did tie it into 14th Street as well. It is limited access, it's one way. We don't want cars driving through there in the middle of the day. So we did work with the city of Wausau to make sure that the street connections are viable. And then they are doing rework, I think, on 17th Street that's going to incorporate pieces of this design. So that's been a really good community partnership. Other things, you can see some of the track items were relocated based on that cut through. It's not really a cut through because we're minimizing that. But the shot put discus, and we did move the gaga ball courts into a new location to be able to make sure that those are still available. We did remove the volleyball courts based on feedback from the group. There wasn't a lot of interest in maintaining them, and I think some of them were already eventually turning over to grass. So if you look in this part, you can't see my arrow, but just above the big orange rectangle in the center of the screen is the multi-purpose addition, and you can see the new parking lot that we relayed out to make sure it fit around the new addition and, provided good site access from the additions shown. So you can see here the multi-purpose, that's the location on the site, and then I'm going to walk around the rest of the building and just give you a couple highlights of each different addition, what changed from the original drawing, or the original referendum package to where we are today. And one thing I do want to highlight is we did really focus on the square footage of the additions to make sure it was efficient. And also we combined what we could to help with mobilization and construction costs. So with that, I just want to go to the south end of the building. This addition that you can see probably best is the new locker room addition, and we did combine it with the fitness. So that was originally two additions. One was around the corner, and then we did modify the ADA access to the front of the building, so that's a good secondary ADA access to this building. So we have two main ADA accesses. I don't know if that's the right word, factored in. So again, that lower parking lot does get us into the new locker rooms and to the pool.
New fitness center will be a very, very good beneficial addition to the building. I think what you'll also see later on in the presentation is this also kind of updates the look of John Muir, makes it a little bit more modern, the front face across the building with some of the new additions that you'll see.
So skipping around to the back of the building, you'll see the tech ed addition and receiving, which is to the northwest on the slide. is now separate from the sixth grade house that's on the north addition part of the slide. The design team worked really hard to figure out the best way to lay out those additions and the most efficient square footage, use of the square footage. You can also see on the top of the slide, that's the new parent pickup and drop off. We were able to modify the parking a little bit to make that more efficient and, you know, kind of clean up how the cars come in and out of that space with dropping the students off. And one of the savings that we were able to capitalize on is we did relocate some of the parking stalls to the pickup and drop off for the cars. But if you look at that group of trees in the middle on the eastern side of this slide, there was originally a parking lot that was supposed to go in there, and as a team, we decided that was superfluous to the, well, it was just extra parking that would be the most efficient, so we moved it around to make sure we were the, you know, the best layout agreed by the team, and that's what we went with. So, I guess anything you want to add regarding that?
No, I think you can move on. There's plenty to talk about.
So we kind of left the best for last. So we went around the building and you'll see this kind of interesting footprint of, it's actually the new front office, new sequence, and the music addition. So we moved the music classrooms and combined it. So we took the opportunity to really increase the front look of the building. I'll show you what a rendering looks like shortly, but we did relay out the front entrance, the parking into the building, and we are doing the maintenance to the parking lot right to the east. So with that, this is the current rendering that the architect put together, moving those music rooms to the front, the new sequence and the new addition just really pops, and it changes the look of how that will feel from the street.
So to the left, you'd see the new front entrance, more secure entry that leads right into the main office structure, so we can make sure we know who's coming into the building in a far better way than we do currently. Then in the centerpiece of the picture, you see the new choir space, and to the right would be the new orchestra room, and then further around the corner would be the new band area, all brand new spaces for these programs.
And as a team, this is what we came together with. And this also does include city feedback from the city of Wausau on what, you know, we did have to tweak a few materials and things like that, but we were able to get feedback from the city, and they do appreciate what we're doing. So with that, I would like to go inside the building a little bit and walk you through what's changing here. So how this slide is set up is we have the order of the slides as we go through. We're going counterclockwise, starting from the front entrance. And I just want to highlight a couple areas. We did put a lot of effort into streamlining the additions. And then just to walk through, addition 1 is the main entry. And we just combined 1 and 2 because that's based on the views. The other half of that is the music wing. We did add a 6th grade addition on the 2nd floor. That's why it's not shown on, this is the 1st floor slide. We did addition number 4 is the tech ed and the receiving addition. Area 5 is the new multipurpose addition, and area 6-7 is the locker room fitness. The areas shown in bluish purple are the areas of major renovation, and we'll highlight those as we go through. So with that, here's a blown up slide of the new addition for the front office, the secure front entry sequence, and the student services renovations. We spent many hours with the staff of both of those areas, with Patrick, Matthew, and Angela to get the proper feedback on what that would be. So I just want to point out we do have a little smaller rendering of each area blown up on the slide as well. So you can see the front office view on how that's going to look in a little bit more detail than the main. And then you can also see that we're exploring maybe an art area on the front entrance just to be really inviting coming in. So we did incorporate the community room, the bridge room, and a few other spaces, support spaces in the front here.
Currently, those spaces are located mostly with our student services, which now moves into the main office structure, which we think makes a lot of sense given some of the needs that are met by those students and families and working with the rest of our front office staff.
So here's a blow-up of the music and auditorium, the music wing. Again, the addition is the brown color, and the renovation is the purplish blue. You can see the layout of the 3 rooms. We did spend a lot of time working with the staff to make sure that their needs were met. We did go through the keyboard, guitar, and the guitar rooms. We added a green room for the stage, just to make sure we flattened out the floors. And one thing to highlight in this area, just cost savings wise, is the addition requires a big firewall between old and new. And we were able to streamline how the corridor works with this big firewall running through the middle. So it looks like and functions like a standard corridor. In the earlier referendum concepts, we had a little bit more corridor space, so we were able to cut some square footage out of the building to help streamline and be more efficient with the layouts.
The current spaces that you see now labeled as guitar and keyboard, et cetera, those are our band, choir, and orchestra rooms currently. So we're not only expanding those programs, but we're moving spaces that are in other parts of the building, centralizing it all in one location really helps us centralize our music and other opportunities.
So some of these are fairly straightforward. These are just renovated spaces. You can see this is on the northeast part of the plan. We're adding a science room, modifying some chemical storage, and we have some special ed here. And we did some major changes to the special ed requirement, or the facility. I'll just say it's the facility needs, and we'll get into how we got that to work in a little bit in this PowerPoint. So here's the new tech ed and receiving wing. You can see we have 2 prototype labs and a woods and manufacturing lab. We also have a separate receiving and storage. We did isolate receiving from some of the classrooms. I can point out how that works in the future, but we were really thoughtful on how these labs work together. There's an existing wood dust collector, so we worked really hard with the staff to make sure that the layout and it would all fit back together between existing and new. And this was a big deal too, because the reason this ended up this way is it was really important to get the adjacent educational needs together. And so, we put the prototype labs, there's business involvement, and Patrick, if you want to expand on that a little bit.
So the 2 teachers and John Winter were crucial in designing this and setting this up. You don't want me doing this, right? You want people who are experts in what they know they need in these places. And so they spent hours putting into a design and giving us very specific details about what each of these rooms should look like right now. And I would say that's also true of the music wing. I didn't mention that before, but again, you've got real expertise designing and organizing these spaces. So I think it's really come together very well.
So one thing I do want to point out in this part of the building is we are doing some major boiler room remodeling. So the old steam boiler plant's going to be coming out. We're going to be adding in a new hot water plant into the same location. So we're working through the phasing on how to do that moving forward. But the old boiler room is going to be renovated, and that's shown on this side, on this slide. So this is a special education wing that we're referring to. So some of the things that, if you were to compare closely the floor plans with the referendum drawings, you'll notice that there's some changes. There's a lot more work coming into this area, and there's a lot of other, we removed some resource rooms. We redefined how the special ed rooms would go. We really looked into the educational requirements if a space really needed to be renovated. And so we were able to take those trade-offs and create a higher level special ed wing, which would include a full, I don't know what the right term is for it, like a special ed assistance type of toilet room back here. And part of this is we were able to, I don't want to say isolate the special education wing, but this is for the higher needs students. And so it gives them their own space. It's still accessible from the rest of the school, but this was something that was a big challenge. And as we worked through together, we made sure that we didn't lose sight of what these kids need. And one thing I just want to point out, like the new multi-purpose, you can see the gym off to the side. Well, that took all the windows out of those classrooms. So we did make sure those kids need daylight too. So we did make sure that those windows were added to that north wall to make, to bring in that daylight to those kids.
If you're familiar with John Muir, you know that this is in the back part of the building. And one of the things that this does is it also moves most of our regular education students out into the main part of the building. Whereas we always have had this extra section of classes that have to go through the cafeteria, and it's a long walk to get to these classrooms, et cetera. This just, again, is a little bit more common sense design for the needs. It allows for us to have special busing that happens throughout the day for some of these students to pull right up to this part of the building in that back area. So I think there's some good decisions that went into this.
Is that the suburbs?
The E-wing, the suburbs.
Yeah, my son told me that's where my son told me that was the suburbs over there when we were doing the tour.
There are other words that I will not use, but yes.
So you can see down on the lower part of the slide, it kind of disappears into the grays, but you can see the new windows, those 4 windows on the center of the slide. It just, how it fits in with the multi-purpose gym that's coming in right next to that. And with the toilet remodel, we were able to prioritize, there's toilet room finishes throughout the building that we're upgrading. And so we made sure there's a few toilet rooms we're not renovating that are low use. And we put all that money into the trade-off to get that toilet room set up for those kids. So this is a multi-purpose room, and I included the cafeteria in this discussion. I'll start with the rendering because that's pretty straightforward. So this is something else that we worked with the city on to have it less industrial looking and still serve the needs of a gym. So we ended up adding some windows, some feedback from the city. The goal again is just to not have it look industrial or minimize the industrialness of it, but it's still a big gym. So we work to meet in the middle. So what's going on in this multi-purpose room, again, we got a lot of feedback from staff and everybody else. So it's gonna serve archery, wrestling, basketball, volleyball, and many other things. So we talked about storage. We made sure the archery in there was safe, so no one can walk in from the outside if they're playing archery. I don't know if that's the right term. If they're doing archery, so safety was still a big concern. We're still working through some of the details. We looked at construction materials to make sure lead time and cost effectiveness was considered. We were very close to make sure that the gym stayed the size that it was in the referendum. And one thing, if you notice on the bottom of the slide, there's some toilet rooms that we're adding to the cafeteria. I believe that was fitness equipment. And so what we did here is we were able to relocate. We did a toilet count on the whole building. And one of the other additions, we didn't actually need to provide new toilet rooms. And so we moved those toilet rooms that were quantified in the new addition into the space so there's better toilet access for the cafeteria and the students during lunchtime. So that was a team effort, and we just made sure that we weren't just adding bathrooms to add bathrooms, but we actually had a plan to make sure that we were thoughtful on where those went, the best served for the whole building.
From a management standpoint, it's far easier to watch those restrooms than around the corner where our current ones are. And we actually expanded the cafeteria by a little bit as well in this design.
Mm-hmm. So the next area that we're focusing in on is the locker rooms and the fitness area. So we are doing a major renovation to the locker rooms. I won't spend a lot of time with that today. On the lower part of the slide on the left, you can see the new swimming locker rooms, athletic locker room. So we did get feedback from the swim coach and the athletic director to make sure that we were on target with how that design would work, and we got approval from the swim coach, among others, to move forward. And then in the lower right-hand part, you can see the fitness center with its own addition, and this is the area that we took the toilet rooms and moved them up to the cafeteria. We didn't need additional toilet rooms down here. And they wouldn't be that practical anyway because they would probably be locked off. And so again, we let code and good design dictate the best locations for those. And by having these two additions put together, we did save with some construction, mobilization, and coordination costs. We did try to get the additions put together as well as we could. And then there's square footage savings too by having these together, you know, with corridor access and things like that, that show up as well. So other areas we'll touch on is, this was a more complicated design in the referendum. And as a team, we really talked through how we wanted this to move forward. So this was part of the area that helped support the special ed remodeling in what I'm calling the special ed wing. And so we have a simple sensory room, we have 2 special ed rooms, and then we converted, I believe, the old keyboard room into one of the science rooms here, just to be, you know, repurpose that space. But we were thoughtful looking at casework, cabinetry, things like that in each classroom, so we didn't redo it if it didn't need to be redone. So we were really thoughtful about trying to save caseworker cabinetry moving forward.
We got one, can you go back a slide, Bob? I'm sorry, I thought I saw on, that's a unisex locker?
Yeah, that was a request.
A request or a code requirement?
It's just off the pool. That is for our special needs students, where we have sometimes some special changing that has to take place with adult supervision. It's not for use for all students or anything like that.
So that's the special ed lockers right there, 100 through 07 if my eyes, okay. Then the ones to the left, you're saying that those that are labeled unisex are also for special ed?
My eyes are not very good either.
It's
but I
the
believe-
second 2 towards the left.
I think there's a women's one, or there's one that feeds into the girls' locker room and one that feeds into the boys' locker room.
They're off the corridor, and so I guess just to hop in on that a little bit, there was a lot of push. There's a lot of students changing in closets and janitors' closets, and it gives all students a safe place to change. That was some of the feedback that we were getting from staff. And so as a team, this was the solution that we worked towards. And you can see that there's a access corridor on the north side of those. And so that was the direction we were given to.
I'm sorry, we have students changing in what? Janitors' rooms?
So it's a storage closet off the pool where we've had some of our special needs students changing with adult supervision and help, just off of the side of the pool that's connected to the locker room. That's what we've had to use because of space and concerns.
Okay, so again, it's special needs versus unisex.
Well, are these
Two
like, these
different
look to be
meanings.
like small,
They're small.
so like one person basically could go in and change clothes.
And
Right.
anybody would have access to those?
Also true, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a,
I think the best analogy I would use, correct me if I'm wrong, is maybe like a family restroom. Like what's labeled as a family restroom where anyone can use it.
got it. Thank you.
So, I mean, the naming of the room, the function is to serve those folks. And, you know, it's hard for us sometimes to name a room in a way that's clear. We
Yeah, it's
do
just
it
the
from a
name
code.
unisex locker sounds like a big, huge locker room where just any, but this is like a single, like
It's just-
small
yes.
changing room
These
basically.
are all
Okay.
recommendations based upon our FIAD staff, based upon the people who are in these rooms, helping us design things to make sense. So.
Right. Yeah, there's a single shower, a toilet, and a sink in each one of them.
Okay, I just can hear the complaints. If it's not available to everybody, at some point we'll get a complaint. My kid went in there and got yelled at, so I just
Yeah.
want to make sure that that's not the intent behind it.
I think we could help with that and the management of those kind of things in terms of our FIAD staff and others being able to have access with people who need it, yes.
So correct, you're correct.
Yeah, they're there for everyone in the building. Okay.
All right, so the multipurpose cafeteria, we talked about the different sports, we have storage in there, and then the toilet rooms, we touched on, support the cafeteria. Oh, am I going the wrong way?
Yeah.
I am. See? All right, so in this area, we're just focusing, like I said, we talked about special ed a little bit, the science rooms, and then we are adding in some ADA casework to the science rooms as well. So this is just a general slide. We don't have the areas identified. We're working through the final finishes and selections right now, but we're doing finishes, ceilings, floors, walls. We're replacing casework that has been identified to come out. We are doing a small office remodel. That was a storage room, but it serves a better purpose as an office. We are doing toilet room finish upgrades through most toilet rooms that get the most use. And like I said, there was an exception in the special ed wing. The toilets we're not modifying anymore because there's not a lot of use that we're looking for. And other areas that we're focusing in on is the ADA door hardware. We're replacing doors, we're adding grab bars, and we're replacing non-ADA compliant handrails. So there's a certain percentage of this project, it's so large that we definitely need to be conscious of accessibility. So we're making a large effort to do that in various ways. So with that, Patrick, if you have any comments regarding the office remodel and other storage or places we were to save, like the home ec suite and things like that.
So, yeah, there's several examples where we looked at where rooms were originally designed, and I was not part of this design. Many of the people who are now in the building were not part of the original planning maybe 3 years ago. So we tried to make it make sense. So there was a special family and consumer ed classroom that was supposed to be across a hall, and we were gonna have to redo the whole space and add all new equipment, et cetera. We moved it back to where the original was. There was not a real need or a upgrade in terms of changing this classroom space around. And we did that with some of the science rooms as well, so that we're not having to redo things that are unnecessarily adding to the costs. We really tried to be efficient and smart about where we were moving things. That made us have to make a few design changes in terms of our house model, et cetera, but nothing that substantially changes it or modifies it in a negative fashion.
So I'll go through this quickly because we, big building, big project, a lot to cover. So this is the second floor. Just to highlight on the top of the slide, we have the new 6th grade wing, and then the remodeled areas include science room, special education room, flex room, and other small miscellaneous things. So this should go through pretty quickly. So just to go counterclockwise again, we did look at, we added a couple science rooms in this wing. We repurposed some rooms into some special ed rooms, and then we did remodel a space into a good book room, because the book room, I think currently on the top of the stairs, we found a better home for that. And then, looked at workrooms and, just general space, nothing too substantial, just touching on a couple different areas up here.
Some of the changes that we made in this overall project also allow us to kind of centralize 8th grade in one part of the building, 7th grade in another part of the building, 6th grade in another part. We know that ongoing discussions might make some changes in terms of who's in our building and how that would look. We feel that if you have 3 classrooms or 3 grades, continue in the building, if that's a different set of grades or something else, we could handle that, and the changes that we're making now are future-proof for many of the things that we would maybe have if we had whatever collection of 3 grades in the building. Different models might cause different changes or need adjustments to the plan, but right now we believe that could be very, very easily adjusted if it's not 8th grade per se, based upon some of the discussions you had earlier in a different group. So,
Yeah, this building lent itself well for future proofing. There wasn't a lot of changes we needed to make. So here's the floor plan of the new 6th grade wing, the new 6th grade house. So we just have the standard set of classrooms for each house that are identified here, and it's on the northeast corner of the site. And we just have some renderings showing it is getting built onto the side of a hill. So you can see the big drop coming down on the renderings on top. But we did provide space in the vestibule for the kids to warm up if it's pretty cold outside. We made sure that it would fit a lot of kids, and
yes.
Toilet rooms, and then the classroom special ed. And we did our best to be consistent with the new classrooms versus the old classrooms. So the school has a feel of a whole.
One other thing that has been a discussion at the board level a couple of times in the last year is the middle school model, the middle school schedule model. You'll notice that we have 6-3 labeled here in this rendering. What we did is we purposed it so that if we had a schedule change where, say, we balanced the schedule and had English language, or English, science, social studies, and math all being more the same, not what we do currently, we would still be able to make that work in our current building or in the building changes that are gonna be happening here. However, if we kept our current scheduling model, we can adjust it and still make those teams work very easily in the same spaces we're talking about here. It's just adding an English class and taking away one of the science or social studies classrooms and making adjustments that we could do with our scheduling. So we feel as though either way, we're prepared for decisions that you guys would help us make.
So this last section of the building, where we added a flex room, or we remodeled the classroom into the flex room, we did some science upgrades, and we did another special ed with the sensory room. And we did get feedback from the special ed teachers and the district level on, a standard versus just each building kind of doing its own thing. So with that, again, we have finishes all over the building. We have casework that we've identified, and then the ADA impact with door hardware and grab bars. And so quickly, just to run through the backside, the mechanical design team is working on equipment selection, the boiler plant rework, expansion, the chiller plant rework and expansion, and pipe routing. All the technical stuff is already coming into play. We're doing for the plumbing side, we're just getting the plumbing started to help support the building changes. And one thing to highlight too, on the next slide, the electrical, is we are working through new utility entrances for a lot of the building based on the addition location. That's part of the work that we're doing here. So electrically, we're looking at power distribution, lighting, telecom, security. For the new and existing areas, fire alarm system modifications for the new and existing areas. Like this note says, we're upgrading and relocating the utility service. The electrical service needs to be expanded to support all the new square footage in the building. We're relocating the existing generator, and we're replacing, there's maintenance for the panels, electrical distribution panels that are included in the project. And so with that, I just want to show, we do have a little bit of a cool thing that we wanted to show you all today. Is one of the things that we did as part of our design process is we did a 3D image of John Muir. So I just want to walk you through how that looks. So give me a sec. Why do it this way? Okay. So here we are. This is a live 3D image, and just walking into the building. I'll give you a quick walkthrough. This has been a tool that's really helped us significantly to understand what's going on. So again, we've done this for this building, and we did it for West High School, and we can walk through anywhere in the building and see what's going on. So we'll just quickly run through here. It's not fully perfect, but you can see we're just walking down the hallway. If we have questions, we know exactly where that bulletin board is, or that wall outlet, or what room 118 is all about. So we'll just walk into the front office here, and you can see this tool has been a fantastic thing during our design meetings to help quantify and expedite decision making, and it helps the design team themselves know what the existing conditions are. And I was going to show I can take measurements and do photos and zoom in really detailed on like nameplate data and things like that. But I just wanted to show off one of the tools that we've been using to help expedite the design and make sure it's a higher quality, to help raise, not that the designers aren't doing a fantastic job, but it helps answer a lot of questions. So with that, let me just get back to my PowerPoint. Actually, if you have any questions while I flip back, ask away.
I've just got two. The first is the security consultant. How much input has he, or I think it's he, had into the design so far?
He has gotten copies of the floor plans and photos of the existing sequence, and we are waiting for feedback. But right now, it's similar to the existing security sequences in the elementary schools, but absolutely he needs to be giving us his 2 cents on what he thinks on this front entrance sequence.
Okay, and the timing is such where his feedback will be received and incorporated before we have to move forward with anything else?
Correct.
Okay. And the second question is, what kind of feedback did you get from Mr. Bowler regarding needs for GT programming? And were those needs incorporated in here?
Not a ton specifically in terms of design of the building or anything like that, but with all the new spaces that we have absolutely space and area to have him work on anything that we're doing.
So did you ask him and he just said, I don't need anything, or did we not ask him specifically for it?
We haven't asked everybody in the building by any means, so no.
Can we make sure that we reach out to him specifically and just, I would be curious to see what he thinks the needs are for GT.
Yep, absolutely.
Anything else?
I'll try to be quick. The parent drop-off point that's what you're talking about, having the bigger vestibule, because we're trying to get rid of the traffic from the front and do the drop-off in the back, so you're giving them a space to be inside, right?
We currently do drop off in the back in the morning. They enter into the cafeteria. One of the areas where sometimes people enter is on Callan Street. That's where our buses drop off. And so that expanded vestibule at the top of the building would help us in cold weather months like this, allow some of those students to come into part of the building, stay warm in the morning, but not be released into the entire building so we can supervise them properly.
And they need that because based on my research this year, middle school kids don't wear coats. I haven't figured out why yet, but that's what I've learned so far this year.
10th graders don't wear
They don't
coats
either?
either.
Okay.
So that's where we're hoping that the main parent drop-off and pickup will occur, or is it?
I would still stay in the back. We just redesigned our traffic flow the last couple of years, and I think it's been a major improvement. In my mind, it's gotten traffic off of Stewart Avenue, off of that side street on 14th. It's allowed us to move the traffic onto what we can control on the property. So with the new driveway in the back in the morning, we would allow that traffic to then feed out to 17th Avenue instead of coming back onto Callan Street where people are dropping off and where bus traffic is. This would be an improvement in that regard. So the drop-off would not necessarily change for our cars, but for where the buses drop off, instead of kids having to stand outside until 7:25 when our teachers can properly supervise them throughout the building, now they would have a space inside the building, which would be much more supervised and better off.
And that's our new driveway on the west side?
That's the top part. That's the vestibule at the top of the building on the north side where the buses would drop off in the morning. So,
Okay.
yeah, the cafeteria in the back where the cars drop off, that would still, we allow people into the building as of 7 in the morning and supervise them there. So
Okay. Is the pool area, the current locker rooms, does that have that hallway now? Where we have the 3 bathrooms? Or is that whole area getting completely wiped out and redone?
The locker room is getting heavily redone.
And I'm asking because that corridor did not exist when I went to school there.
Right,
So I'm wondering if at some point it was added or if it's
No.
just totally getting redone.
so I think the only areas that are remaining, we did work to keep the air handling units intact. Tried to be thoughtful about that, so we didn't move them just to move them. But the design problem that we were solving with those locker rooms was a challenge to get the supervisions and the balance between the new layout of the locker rooms and those smaller locker rooms, the special ed and we'll call it the family locker rooms or the
Okay.
unisex locker rooms.
That's good, thank you. I more of a curiosity, I didn't know if it got remodeled at some point since I was there. Tell me about the new gym, because I did not realize that was on the referendum. Are we looking for so we have 3 class spaces for each grade level, or?
So this
Because the other gym isn't big enough?
The other gym limits us. We have, many of our Phi-Ed classes have to be in places all around the building just to do their normal routines. We used to use, for example, the archery in the basement, which is not allowed any longer. So that's part of the reason why this will be very beneficial to us. Sometimes we've had to have classes go outside or be in the pool, and the rotation of classes, obviously we'll still do those things, but this will just give us a much more a much more variety of spaces. You can see that we'll have basketball, volleyball, the archery would be designed for this space and built into it from the very beginning as well. We'll also be able to use this for another supervision area during indoor recess time during lunch when it's too cold to go outside, which currently is very limiting in our one gym space that we have right now. So this will give us another area. So just a variety of different ways in which this is going to help us. After school hours, as a former basketball coach, I know the scheduling of trying to get all the travel teams and all the different groups with volleyball and basketball and all these kind of things into spaces. This would provide the district with another very premium space for a couple of different practice facilities for groups after school. It wouldn't be our main gym space for like games, but we would offer that as an opportunity as well for student assemblies, lots of different possibilities.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? So I also just want to mention, we did work really hard, with the budget balancing and making sure that we weren't affecting the educational outcome of the building. And I would say, we probably reduced the total square footage of the new construction by about 10%, which is actually the most expensive square footage on the building. So we've been working really hard, knowing the current climate to actively as a team, we've been working together to do that. So I guess I just wanted to make sure that everyone's aware that this has been a really collaborative effort to make sure that we're not missing those points. So any other questions? All right, we got one more for you. We're done with John Muir.
Jason Foster, Activities Director at Wausau West.
Kurt Vanden Heuvel, Activities Director at Wausau East.
Excellent. So here we go. Our last update for the day, but if there's other agenda items, we'll try to answer your questions. So we're going to run through, there's a little bit of rework on how this project came together, so I'll just talk through that. And then we'll go into the details of any questions that you all ask on why we made certain decisions with our team here at the desk. So with that, you'll notice that this one's called East and West High School Phase 1 Athletics, or something similar to that. We did restructure it. We did pull some pieces out of West. So that will be in Phase 2 in the future once we have a little bit clearer direction on. That's something that would be affected by what's going on as well. So we made that decision up front, and so I'll just show you what we're focusing on today. So with that, the scope of work at East High School in the referendum included athletic field lighting. We have basketball, baseball, football, and softball fields that we're looking at. We're adding turf to both the baseball and softball and the football, the multi-purpose field. And then we have safety netting going in for the baseball and softball. So I have a little more details here, just some history on how we got here. So we did have the athletic tennis lighting coming into East. It was moved from West, and that was a team decision based on the usage of the field. And then we can touch on that in a moment or two. And then we also have, we also did not include any design logos. We could touch a little bit on that. And then we did add outfield drainage because that was a need that came out of the buildings and grounds. So this is kind of a hybrid between where we were today, where we were and where we are today. So is there anything that we want to add at East real quick on why we made any of these decisions? You comfortable?
I would just say that the rationale behind them moving the lights on the tennis courts from Wausau West over to Wausau East was the number of courts that Wausau East has. They have more courts, so they do more hosting. They currently host the conference meet for boys and girls, so it just seemed like it made more sense to have those lights at Wausau East than it did Wausau West.
Okay, so at West High School, what our original referendum scope of work was, tennis court recoding, which we're actually doing in a different bid package, or with West. We're looking at athletic field lighting, 1 football, 1 baseball, 1 softball, so 3 fields total. We were looking at turf for the football, soccer field, the baseball and the softball, and then the safety netting for both softball and baseball. So we just noted why the tennis lighting moved to the other site, and then field turf. So this is why this changed. We put that on hold for the multipurpose field for a year because there's a lot of big decisions out there that it just makes sense to wait for that feedback before we move ahead. And then we did notice, we got feedback that the outfield drainage needed to be improved upon, and so we added those. We're looking into those as part of the scope. So with that, we've had 5 design meetings with you all, the building principals, some coaches, some folks from Nexus. So we came up with a collaborative solution that everyone could agree to. So do you have anything you want to add regarding the design meetings?
I would say on top of that, having a meeting with our contractors on turf specific as to what type of turf, and on top of that, us at our conference convention going through and talking with various vendors and different ADs of what types of facilities they use and how they use their facilities with turf and things like that was kind of our outside task that we went through.
So the final turf system selection is still to be determined. So we're working through what the best options are, moving forward. So with that, here's the simple concepts for East High School. We have the softball field on the left. These were rotated to fit on the slide, so you'll see the north arrow shows that the softball field's to the north and the baseball field's to the south. And if you look, you can see the different field where the pole lights come in on the fields for both baseball and softball. And we did include a couple pictures of what those fields might look like when they're complete. So you can see the softball field and the baseball field with how that looks at East. So at East, we are still doing the multipurpose field. So I just wanted to clarify that because we're not doing it at West. And what we're looking for here is we have the striping, based on the feedback from everybody, football, lacrosse, and soccer. So we have all 3 of those fields fitting into there. So if you look at the white field as a football, the gray field, if you can look, it's right in there. It's lacrosse, and then the soccer field is black. But just not to be confused, there's dimension lines on the drawings. The soccer field does not extend into the track. The soccer borders are within the oval of the green space. So we are going to include shock pads, and like we talked about, we're still working through the final specification for the turf. So here's the West High School concepts. You can see the baseball field and the softball field. And one thing to note is we are using, I believe it's the baseball field, is going to illuminate the track to the south. So as part of that lighting package, again, we heard what you all were saying with getting that illuminated. So we're working to get that in. So pretty straightforward. We had a lot of discussion going on, some pretty good stuff. So I guess I just want to throw out, is there any questions for the athletic fields?
Given the uncertainty based on what we talked about before, does it make sense to do any lighting field work at East? I mean, if conference meets, for example, conference tennis meets, right? Let's say West, we end up making a decision, West is 10 through 12, 9 through 12, whatever it is. Those meets would be held at the high school, at which time wouldn't we need?
I would say at this point, the conversations that we've had is we kind of look at one high school, 2 campuses, and there is no plan at this place to expand the tennis courts at Wausau West, just to resurface them. So the fact that they have more courts at East than West, I think one of the things we've talked about is that the facility at the existing Wausau East would remain our varsity tennis facility.
So that's odd, given the direction, right? I mean,
Well, I think
if you're going to have a varsity tennis program, and again, just playing devil's advocate, if you're going to have it at West, and West is the high school, you're not going to truck people across town to go play tennis at the middle school
For the
or junior high.
competitions.
Pardon?
Certainly, for the competitions, you certainly could, if that's That's not that unusual a circumstance.
I think if you just look at it from that snapshot, it seems odd. I think if you look at it from the standpoint that our hockey players go to Marathon Park to play and our lacrosse kids go to Town Field to play, I think it's kind of something that's already done within our school district.
No, I realize that, but I'm talking, what we're discussing is making it more efficient, more effective, better experience for everybody. I mean, having varsity tennis programs at a high school would make sense rather than having to incur all of the other issues that go along with transportation and what have you. And I'm just asking, like, timing wise, what if you held on it? Like, do the lights have to go in at East? Is there anything imminent about it?
Do they have to go in? You know, I guess, you know, we're hosting events there now. If we lit there and then decided at a later point we wanted to expand tennis at West, we could certainly do that, but that again would be a referendum question. And currently, we wouldn't have space to expand tennis at West.
Understood, but again, thinking long-term.
I think what we're doing now doesn't really limit any options moving forward.
What's the cost of the lighting of the tennis courts?
We can get back to you on that. I mean, we have an estimate, but I don't want to estimate poorly
Okay.
at a board meeting.
No, that makes sense. Because it's a good question. If we're talking about a 3-year referendum plan, maybe the lights are one of the things, like we have with some of the other things, that we push towards year 3 if we're not quite sure where the senior high is going to go.
Well, I guess the other half of that answer is at the 95%, we can provide with the budgets. We can go through that with the lighting in a little bit more detail on how that would look.
Because I would assume, unlike some of these other things, that seems like a very separate project. Like, it doesn't seem like it wouldn't be that hard to pull out.
Right,
Of-
and it could be bid as an alternate with probably not too much paint attached to that. Paint just being, there's not a lot of redesign and, you know, modifying the drawings to accommodate that.
Right.
So, I mean, that's definitely something we can explore on what that impact is.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to talk about at that 95% when we're talking dollars and timing.
But I think that's kind of where the whole discussion went about the lights, is that if we do end up making that at West, the campus, then obviously we'd want to expand that to be able to host like East does. East already has the courts available, so that's kind of how that conversation came about, and we are currently hosting all of our conference meets there. So to be able to have that opportunity, I think, is how we got to that decision. It kind of, we went around, like, if we had to create a parking lot there, and could we re-establish the tennis courts elsewhere, and then that would, you know, you're not tearing out lights on top of tennis courts as well.
No, I think it was reasonable. I think to come to that decision because you didn't have enough money to work with to expand the courts at West and put the lights there. So that makes sense that you got to that point, but it might make sense to hold off on finalizing it.
So you're considering the tennis court lights or the softball and baseball lights over at East as well? Does the question
Tennis.
cover all of that?
No, I'm assuming that softball, baseball would still be needed
Okay.
at that facility regardless. It's just the conference tennis one are what caught my attention.
That sounds good. We'll look into that for you for the 95.
Any other questions on the athletics? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay, then we will move into some action items. And these are items that we already went over in our last meeting at the Committee of the Whole, so we'll probably get through them fairly quickly unless there's some additional questions. First up, from the Education Operations Committee meeting, are new course requests for the 2023-24 school year. At the November Education Operations Committee, Dr. Rauscher presented new course requests in high school mathematics, technology, and engineering, and music for recommendation to the full board. She also updated us on a previously approved art course at Wausau East High School. I'm seeking a motion to approve the 2023-24 new course requests as presented.
So moved.
Yep, second.
We have a first and a second. Are there any additional questions, anything since last meeting? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. At the November Education Operations Committee meeting, Dr. Rauscher also presented the suggested 2023-24 student fees for recommendation to the full board. I'm seeking a motion to approve the 2023-24 student fee request as presented.
So moved.
First and a second. Any additional questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. I gotta slow down. The Wausau School District 4-year-old kindergarten program has entered into program agreements with community collaboration sites since 2002. In the past 5 years, the district has had agreements with the following sites: Wausau Childcare, Mountain View Montessori, Woodson YMCA, Wausau Branch, Newman Catholic Schools. At the November Education Operations Committee meeting, Kara Rakowski, 4K Principal and Early Childhood Coordinator, and Julie Schell, Director of Elementary Education, reviewed the program agreement for the 2023-2024 school year. I'm seeking a motion for approval of the 4K program agreement as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. At the November Education Operations Committee meeting, Cale Bushman, Director of Pupil Services, shared the school safety drill evaluations and presented the district-wide safety plan for 2022-2023. I'm seeking a motion to approve the district-wide safety plan for 2022-2023 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
First and a second. Any questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next was the 2023-2024 calendar exploration. Work continues on this one. I think we have some additional information as well. Work continues on the 2023-2024 Wausau School District calendar. Diana White will share with the board the results of a staff survey, taking a look at adding in more consistent professional development and independent learning days. In addition, a question has come up about whether or not the district should apply for a waiver from the Department of Public Instruction to begin school before September 1st, 2023 for referendum construction purposes. The administration will ask the board whether or not they would like the district to explore getting a waiver. So we went over some of this at the last meeting, but we've got some new information as well.
Yes, so I can go through this fairly quickly. So we'll just start with that staff survey that I had mentioned with my colleagues at the last meeting. We asked staff just some quick short questions to get their preference. We had sent a video explaining why we were reaching out to them to get their input, knowing that we were considering some different options as it related to next year's school calendar. So one of the things that we asked them is how we use our professional learning. Would they find it important to both engage in that new learning, but then have time to collaboratively apply that learning? And overwhelmingly, of the more than 600 staff members that completed the survey, a majority said that was either very important to them or important. So then we also asked about those independent learning days that we had also talked about briefly at the last meeting. Would they be supportive of that concept, knowing, and we explained that this would not at all be like that emergency remote learning that we've been used to. Overwhelmingly of the more than 600 staff members who responded, majority were very supportive or supportive of that move. We also asked them about if there was a way to build in those traditional snow days, meaning there would not be remote learning on those days. How important would that be to them? And again, a majority said very important or important. So as you mentioned, a question has come up knowing that we have some referendum construction and a lot of the work done during this time period would be at John Muir and Wausau West. A question has come up about whether or not we pursue a waiver from the Department of Public Instruction that would allow us to start school before September 1st. So the only question that we had asked staff as it related to that is how many days they would want in between their professional learning that starts before the school year and the start of school. And more split, but a majority said they would prefer just that one day. But then 2 days and 3 days were split evenly. So the question then would be, what would a calendar look like? And Cassie has it on the presentation here, but the idea would be that we would start school on August 29th. And so that professional learning would move a week earlier. Perfect, thank you, Cassie. And then at the end of the school year, we would actually end in May rather than that first week of June. But everything else stays consistent there, and you see indicated in blue where those independent learning days would fall. So then, just to wrap up this presentation, would the board like us to pursue exploring that waiver? There is a form, and then we'd need to hold a public hearing. I will tell you, we talk with other districts as they are all building their calendars, and I can say that DC Everest is looking at pursuing a waiver, and when I asked them what date they were looking at, August 29th was also the same date. So we would align with them if we both pursue that waiver, which seems to be very important to those in our district who either live there or work there.
So over the years, I've had a lot of people ask, like, why don't we start earlier? Both to end in May and just the idea of getting in a few days of sort of setting the ground rules and getting prepared kind of thing with the students and then having that long weekend. And I've heard the opposite too. Some people say, well, we don't want to start until after that long weekend.
Right.
But and we've never done it that I can recall, do we need a reason like referendum construction to get the waiver? We can't just say it's because this is what we think it should be?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, they have specific reasons. So like when we fill out the form, we have to indicate which reason and explain why. Because otherwise we would need to start September 1st or thereafter.
Was that a question, Jim? Nope, wasn't. Too slow.
So we're only able to get the waiver because we're in a referendum.
That's one reason.
Okay.
Yep, and there's a whole list, but this is the one that we would.
And I was just asking because I'm thinking after we're done with the referendum, will we have to go back to our schedule? Okay.
Yes.
Or we look at that list again. If people like it, I mean, if people don't like it, then we wouldn't. But if families and staff liked it, then get that list out.
That's $100 referendum. Kind of have to have construction go.
Oh, okay. Any other questions, comments from the board?
Just moving it to 3 days or 4 days you said it doesn't change any of the other ones where the half days for
Right.
elementary or
Yep,
none of the other
The
stuff?
quarters still balance out, so we left all of that alone. We did, and I should just mention briefly that, so school starts August 29th, and we had also talked about the last meeting, putting in wellness days. So that Friday, so right before Labor Day weekend, that is a no work day, no class day, is how it is in the calendar. So that would give a longer weekend.
Okay, then I am seeking a motion to direct administration to explore obtaining a waiver from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction that would allow the Wausau School District to start classes before September 1st for referendum construction purposes.
So moved.
Second.
A first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we move on to our open forum. Any professional growth and development to report on for the month from board members? Okay, Mr. Webster, any legislative update?
Just a very short mention that everybody's going to be looking at budgets coming up in the next few months. including Governor Evers, who's going to be having some listening sessions. The CISA 9 superintendents met and I think have come up with some bullet points about things that they're concerned about. The one thing I'm concerned about and will be interested in is that the resolutions have now been posted on the WASB website, and we'll be reviewing them in one of the next couple of meetings before the annual meeting. And I will email my report.
Thank you. Superintendent commentary.
Nothing to add.
That's a good night for that. It's almost 9 o'clock. I'd ask that the written board member liaison district activity report be added into the official record. And with that, I seek a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.